Welcome to Stockholm, Sweden, and the 2025 Nobel Prize Teacher Summit hubs. My name is Lotta Jeppson. I'm an educator at the Nobel Prize Museum, and I'm here to introduce the hubs to you. Just a few minutes ago, here at Münchenbryggeriet, we finished a program where almost 350 teachers from around the world have gathered to listen to a fantastic lineup of speakers with 2 Nobel Prize laureates on site and to discuss with teacher colleagues. Now it's your time to join. The hubs format for the Nobel Prize Teacher Summit is based on local engagement, where schools, universities, science centers and Swedish embassies around the world invite teachers to watch the recorded version of the summit and together discuss and reflect upon the theme. The theme title this year was The Future of Democracy. When facing the challenges of our time, the role of teachers is crucial. How do we teach about democracy, trust and critical thinking? And what skills do young people need to become informed participants in shaping and safeguarding a democratic society? Today has been a deep dive into the future of democracy, its complex nature, and how it needs to be safeguarded against quick fixes and against populist solutions. We have discussed the future of democracy today from different angles and perspectives. Now, the interviews and the lectures are between 15 to 25 minutes long, and it's easy to choose between the segments and find the one that you are most interested in, both in the broadcast and also in the workbook. And if you haven't found it already, all the material is available at the Nobel Prize Teacher Summit website. So good luck. We hope it will be an inspirational material for you and that it will spark some interesting discussions. And remember, without excellent teachers, no new Nobel Prize laureates.
Hello everyone. I would like to say a very warm welcome to the Nobel Prize Teacher Summit in 2025. My name is Hanna Stjärne. I'm the Executive Director of the Nobel Foundation, and it's truly inspiring to meet you all here today, coming from around 30 different countries all over the world. And to meet like this, with inspiration from the Nobel Prize laureates and their achievements, that's such an important task today. It is at the core of what we do in the Nobel sphere, and we are very happy to welcome you here. And today we will meet experts, scientists, and of course Nobel Prize laureates. We are proud to welcome Maria Ressa here today. Maria is a journalist, an investigative journalist from the Philippines, and she got the Nobel Peace Prize in 2021. And she got it for her work, and now I'm going to quote the actual prize nomination for her work, Safeguarding Freedom of Expression as a Precondition for Democracy and Lasting Peace. And being a journalist myself by profession, I remember being extra touched when the Nobel Peace Committee awarded Maria and her colleague this prize, that they highlighted journalism and democracy that year. And we're also welcoming Leymah Gbowee from Liberia, who was awarded the Peace Prize in 2011 for her work for her non-violent efforts to promote peace and the struggle for women's rights. And they will today, of course, talk about democracy. And we will all talk about democracy today. We live in turbulent times, and your role as teachers is extra important. It's crucial. You teach democracy, you teach trust, you teach critical thinking. You educate young people to become knowledgeable citizens. And I hope that today's discussions will help you in the important work that you do every day. I hope that you could learn from each other, and that Maria, Leymah and the other experts that you will meet today can give you some new thoughts, some new inspiration and maybe some new tools. And at last, in this welcoming remark, I would like to quote another Nobel laureate, Nobel Prize laureate. It's a quote about understanding, and it's a quote about bravery. We don't need to be afraid about anything in life. We need to understand it. It's time now to understand more so that we are less afraid. And this was said by the Nobel Laureate in Physics in 1903 and in Chemistry 1911, Marie Curie. So welcome to the Nobel Prize Teacher Summit in 2025.
Thank you, Hanna, and indeed it is so very wonderful to see you all here. My name is Karin Claesson, and me and my colleagues, Pontus, Sara, Gustav, all the others here around us, we have been longing for this day. I don't know if you feel the same, but when I wake up in the morning and read the news, or the headlines anyway, if I'm late, I more often feel despair. I mean, what is going on in the world? It is a bit like as if I wake up in a dystopic novel, and it seems like the only lesson that we get from history is that we never, ever learn from it. And yet, despair does not stand unchallenged. Throughout the day, the gloominess within me gets contradicted by so many things. Tokens of kindness and tolerance while doing all the ordinary stuff, as well as getting reports on organized protests and demonstrations for peace and equality somewhere in the world. It is all very confusing, and as history also do tell us, loud and clear, we are both grounds for despair as well as reasons for hope. So we are going to talk, as Hanna said, about democracy today, and we do not stand neutral in this matter. Since 1901, the Nobel Prize has been awarded to laureates who have worked for the greatest benefit of humankind. Scientists, they have searched for facts, not alternative ones. Writers have described injustices and abuses. And peace workers, they have responded to the crippling sentiments of greed and hostility, and they have done so with persistence and with courage. And in every single aspect of all this, education have been a fundament. So let's talk about this today together, and Gustav, we do have some guests that will help us with it.
Yes, indeed. Not only do we have Nobel laureates, we also have economists, we have political scientists, philosophers. There's even a professor of responsible AI. Wouldn't that be nice? So we have lots of different experts. But the most important people here today are, of course, you. You are not an audience today, you are participants. And in order for you to be able to participate as much as possible, well, of course, with your colleagues around your table, but you can also do that by, well, getting in touch with Sara. There you are.
Yes, please, and please do that, because we are all so eager to hear your thoughts about this day. And if you have any questions or a reflection, you see on your table this QR code. If you scan it, you can submit your question, and then I will read them, and I will ask as many as possible. But now I have a question. Pontus, what will happen during this day?
Well, this will be a fully packed day. We'll go through tons of interesting questions and perspectives on democracy. And our day will contain lectures, interviews, discussions, and of course our breakout sessions, where you can dig a little deeper on how to bring these questions to your classroom. At 4:30 p.m., we'll close the day with some music, some time to reflect, and to talk a little bit more with each other. We'll expect this to be a very interesting day, and we certainly look forward to hear from our speakers and from you. We also would like to thank the Nobel Prize Museum's main donors, the Erling Persson Foundation, the Knut and Alice Wallenberg Foundation, and the Katarina and Sven Hagströmer Foundation, who through their support have made this event possible. Thank you very much. We also would like to thank Lärarstiftelsen and the Swedish Institute, whose support enables us, or enables more teachers, to experience the summit. I would also like to welcome the teachers and the educators who have joined us from EF Education First. Well, without any further ado, let's get going, and we have Karin with our first guest over there.
So, yes, our first guest. A warm welcome to you, Maria Ressa. Such a great joy having you here. In 2021, you were awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. You received it jointly with the Russian editor and journalist Dmitry Muratov from the Novaya Gazeta, the paper. And you got it for safeguarding freedom of expression. You were already a very skilled and experienced journalist when you, in 2012, founded the digital news site Rappler. Still around, and you still use it as your journalistic platform from the Philippines mainly. What was the intentions when you started in 2012 with this news site?
You know, my elevator pitch when we were putting the funds together for Rappler is that it's simple. We build communities of action, and the food we feed our communities is journalism. This is my 39th year as a journalist, so I'm much older than many of you, I think. But so much has changed in that time period. So I'd opened the Manila bureau for CNN in the late 80s. Then I opened the Jakarta bureau of CNN in 1995. I was a traditional broadcast journalist. Then I decided to choose home. I'm Filipino and I'm American. And, I chose Manila as my home. I went home to take over the largest news organization in the Philippines, about 1,000 journalists working together. That is the news group that our former president, Rodrigo Duterte, took the franchise away from, and they no longer can transmit on the airwaves. And after 6 years of running that news organization, I saw the technology, right? Does anyone here not have a cell phone? Right? So this technology, I thought, traditional news groups put either their youngest people on the internet or their third string. And it was time, I thought, to really explore what the internet could do. That's why we started Rappler. About 100 people, very young. The median age in the Philippines is 23 years old. Our median age in Rappler is 23 years old. So when we came under attack, I was very protective of our reporters who literally are on the front lines. What was the idea for it? Be where our people are. And traditional news organizations in 2011 and 2012 were ignoring this, but I thought this is where we needed to be. So I drank the Kool-Aid of Facebook. For 6 years in a row, up until 2021, Filipinos spent the most time online and on social media globally. I hate to send you to X, but I will post that on Blue Sky as well, those statistics of where we are. And we also know that from the Cambridge Analytica whistleblower, that we were what he called the petri dish for tactics of mass manipulation. They tested it in our country, and if it worked, they ported it over to the West, America in particular. So in that scandal, American accounts were the most numbers compromised. The country with the second most number of compromised accounts in that scandal were Filipinos. Sorry, what a long answer to your question. I guess just to say that after the Arab Spring, which quickly turned into the Arab Winter, we thought that the internet could democratize our societies and our people. But in the end, ultimately, since they're owned by private companies, this became You know, I said this in the Nobel lecture in 2021. It became a behavior modification system. And now, thank you for being here this morning. You, the teachers, your ripple effect. You have significantly far more power now because the next generation is being entertained to death, right? The next generation is being manipulated to keep scrolling at the expense of their own ability to learn, to write, and to find meaning. Sorry to be so bleak so early in the morning, but
That's what we do.
I know. Is that-
Well, and you mentioned, I mean, in 2012, things have changed, and
Yeah.
well, you mentioned the Arabic winter. There was such a lot of hope in the beginning, and it went other directions. You mentioned Rodrigo Duterte, and he became president in 2016.
2016.
And he stayed as such for 6 years.
That's the 1-year term, a 6-year term for a Philippine president.
Yes, yeah, and he before he was elected, if correct me if I'm wrong, he said exactly what he was going to do, and he was going to have a war on drugs, and so he did. So many thousands of primarily poor young men were executed without trials in the streets. Maria Ressa, you were not one of his favorite journalists. And Rappler,
Statement.
yeah, so yeah, it's not a very nice one, but
Yeah.
it's still, yeah.
No, I would wake up, and I remember several dates. You know, he'd have these long night press conferences starting at midnight, and then I remember waking up and just when the president of a country targets you, it's asymmetrical warfare, and I just never responded because I responded by doing my work. I responded by defending myself in court. I responded by giving the office the respect it deserved, even if the person in office behaved in ways that crushed the office, right? Sorry, I didn't mean to take you.
No,
But this is what we went through, and now you're seeing it play out, right? In 2016. So part of the reason the social media penetration rate was so high in the Philippines was also because we campaigned to bring it to our students, right? When Rappler was beginning in 2011, I never put up a marketing arm because I had a civic engagement team. What I would use for marketing, we used for civic engagement. Because in the age of exponential lies, we now have to figure out what are we doing as a society to respond to this, right? So the reason why so many people were on Facebook, why Facebook became our internet, 100% of Filipinos on the internet are on Facebook still. And the design of the platform, right? So I saw this in 2018, MIT had a study that said lies spread 6 times faster on social media. And then in 2017, our own data from the Philippines showed that if you lace your message, your post with fear, anger, and hate, it can spread exponentially, right? The reason why you keep scrolling is because if you are angry, you can't put it down. It is mildly addictive by design. And part of the reason now, you know, I came under attack in 2016. Rappler came under attack. We grew really fast because we were on Facebook. We became the top online only news site by 2013, 2014. So within a year and a half, we moved up because of that. But there's a cost, right? Nothing comes for free. And we were also pummeled to death with information warfare. I was getting an average of 90 hate messages per hour. And at the time when the EU was working on the Digital Services Act, when Germany was rolling out the GDPR, I testified in all of these because I had the data. And when Australia decided that you can't get on these platforms until you're 16 years and above, I also testified. And believe this is the right thing. If you're not going to let kids have alcohol at a certain age, this is mildly addictive. Sorry, I didn't mean to go into it. It's just, this is the least regulated industry globally. And it is in the pocket of every one of not just our generation, but the younger generation. And you now have enough evidence of the impact of the technology. The Surgeon General, outgoing, in 2023, finally wrote a piece that looked at the impact on teenagers, right? Higher levels of sleeplessness, ADHD for young girls, teenage girls, higher levels of eating disorders. I teach at Columbia University now, and I really worry about whether or not our next generation will learn to write. Because how many have tried ChatGPT or Llama, right? I always tell our students, you cannot outsource going to the gym. Think about it.
Unfortunately.
I know. I would love to if I could. But you cannot outsource going to the gym. You cannot outsource it. Writing can be painful. You're supposed to go through that pain to be able to learn to write and get clarity of thought, right? This is worrisome to me, what our next generation is going to shortcut. They think they're learning, but are they, right? Sorry, with a machine that is at best 16% wrong. The tech companies call it hallucinates, and the best they've gotten it to is 16%, meaning none of the technology that you touch is actually anchored in facts, not social media and not generative AI. So think about that. And then the last part, sorry, I sound like you're warning for tech, right? I love tech. We're building tech. And that's the reason it comes from really a place that's data-driven. Social media, if you think about the fact that that in 2018 lies spread faster, that's an MIT study. That was before Elon Musk bought Twitter and turned it to X. It's significantly worse today. Now, if you say a lie a million times, it becomes a fact. The three sentences I've said over and over since 2016. If you don't have facts, you can't have truth. Without truth, you can't have trust. Without these three, we don't have a shared reality. We can't solve any problem, let alone existential ones like climate change. We can't have democracy. And then the last part, the corollary to that is, what values does this incentive system teach? It's like you tell your child, lie all the time, and I'm going to keep giving you ice cream. It doesn't work. So this is what we're grappling with. You are teaching at a time where your values are being confronted by the tech that's ubiquitous. So I guess I'm just saying, you have a lot of responsibility today.
Yeah. You said such an important thing that lies spreads faster than facts, especially when they are laced with hate and anger. Do we have a brutalized language?
Absolutely. And it isn't just brutalized. Sophia Noble wrote about the flattening of meaning, right? So we'll start with the word democracy. Democracy doesn't mean the same thing in the Philippines as it does in China, as it does in America, where it's changing very quickly today. So it's the flattening of meaning that we have. It's the fact that errors, lies on tech, they don't call it lies. What do they call it? Hallucination, new meaning, right? So this is a transformative moment. And let me connect it directly to how our societies and governance works, right? If the tech hacked our biology, because they know this from A/B testing, right? If it hacked our biology, meaning it took our emotions and they figured out through A/B testing that anger keeps you scrolling longer. So fear, anger, and hate. If you changed the way I feel. It changes the way I look at the world. It changes the way I act and the way I vote. Sweden, just in March, in Gothenburg, VDEM came out with its latest study this year that said that 72% of the world is now under authoritarian rule, right? Changes the way you look, the way you act, and the way you vote. We are electing illiberal leaders democratically, and we've rolled it back to, according to VDEM, 1978 levels. So this is the question that we have. After the Nobel lecture, I really came down and said 2024 is the tipping point year. There were more than 74 major elections, but 2025 is the year that will decide whether or not democracy survives, or whether this form of fascism will take root and spread. So again, you are the community that have direct contact to our next generation. What will we value?
But speaking of democracy, when you and Dmitry Murata received the Nobel Prize, in the prize motivation that the Norwegian Peace Prize Committee writes, it says that the prize was for your efforts to safeguard freedom of expression, which is a precondition for democracy and lasting peace. So in what way do you see that democracy, in how you now define it, is connected to freedom of expression and free media?
Well, that phrase has been repeated over and over, and it's really great to see Berit all the way at the back, right? Because you cannot... Dmitry Muratov and I, along with 300 other Nobel laureates, came out with a 10-point action plan in April 2022, and we released it in Geneva. Nobel laureates, civil society groups, the point of this was to what are we going to do? What kinds of action points do we need to safeguard our democracy? 3 buckets. The first bucket was to stop surveillance for profit. And what I mean by that is, it wasn't until 2019 that we even had a name for the business model of tech. And it was coined by Shoshana Zuboff in Harvard, Harvard emeritus professor, in her book, Surveillance Capitalism, right? So surveillance for profit, what does that mean? If you are on Facebook, right, as of last year, Consumer Reports said that more than 2,380 massive data sets are pulled together for every one of us on Facebook. And Facebook will say, we just use machine learning to build a model of you. They don't say that model knows you better than you know yourself, because it's predictive analytics. And then let's replace the word model with clone. So did you give permission to get cloned online? I didn't. So they clone all of us on the platform, and this is the same in almost every single one. And AI comes in and creates this massive database for micro-targeting. Micro-targeting is not the old advertising from media. Micro-targeting is taking your weakest moment to a message and selling it to a company or country, right? That's the insidious manipulation I mentioned in the Nobel lecture. We can break it down in data. But the problem with this, of course, is, do we have agency? Do we still have agency? And I think this is what we're living through today. The last part is that news organizations, so you start with journalism and democracy. Sorry, let me go back to the 3 points. Stop surveillance for profit. The second is stop coded bias. Because if you are a woman, LGBTQ+, if you're an ethnic minority, if you're marginalized in any way in the physical world, if you're from the global south, you are further marginalized in the virtual world. That's second. The third and final one goes right back to what the Norwegian Nobel Committee said, which is, we said journalism is the antidote to tyranny. A journalist is not the same thing as an influencer. No offense to influencers. You know, we are not here to be popular. Our mission is to hold power to account, and it is really painful sometimes to do that. You have to sacrifice a lot. In my case, in Rappler's case, I had to be okay with going to jail cumulatively for more than a century to keep doing my job. And until today, I have to ask my Supreme Court in the Philippines for approval to be here today, to travel outside the Philippines. The Nobel, by the way, once I got that, they started giving me approval to travel. So thank you.
Glad to hear. And speaking of jail, Rodrigo Duterte was, I say suddenly, maybe that's not your word, but he was arrested a couple of weeks ago. And he is charged with crimes against humanity by the International Criminal Court, ICC.
Right.
And he's now brought to The Hague. So what he's risking now, there are still charges against you, Maria Ressa, and prison is a reality for you and has been for such a long time.
Almost a decade, right? So if you're a citizen in a democracy today, please know when you elect a dictator to be an authoritarian leader as our democracy shift, right? If you do that, the time to actually protect your rights is not later. It's at the very beginning, because you only get weaker over time. And you can see this. Yes, Rodrigo Duterte is now at The Hague, and I am here in front of you, right? And I can travel. So, but when we were starting, my lawyers told me we were crazy, that I should negotiate. And I thought, negotiate what, right? Should I go to the palace? They certainly invited, but what are you willing to give up? And so you have, in our case, the question we asked Filipinos, that we asked ourselves is, what are you willing to sacrifice for the truth? And there wasn't anything to compromise, right? Because if I had gone to the palace, they would have just told us the 3 C's: corrupt, coerce, co-opt. Corrupt, coerce, co-opt. And it was the same in media, it was the same in business, it was the same in academia. The end goal is to bend rule of law to the point that it serves the most powerful person in the country. Well, to say all of that, let's take that moment and just, I guess I still haven't really, in the Philippines, because the first casualty in our battle for facts is the number of people killed in this brutal drug war, right? You said thousands. Our Commission on Human Rights in December 2018 said at least 27,000 had already been killed. So that's the first casualty in our battle for facts. Those families worked untiringly for justice, along with the activists, the human rights activists, and the journalists who testified for this arrest warrant. So now it's ongoing, but it's still tearing our country apart. But let me leave you with why you need to fight for your rights at the very beginning. Because impunity ends. Rodrigo Duterte is at The Hague, and victims are now empowered to speak again. Justice comes, it's just in this day and age, the tech is on the side, is enabling the injustice that many of us are living through.
Maria Ressa, you said during extremely challenging times that has been very dangerous for you, that there has never been such a good time being a journalist, and that says something about you. Please, a warm hand to Maria Ressa.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maria and Karin. Maria Ressa mentioned Vedem a couple of times in her talk now, and it seems like a thought that our next guest is a professor at Vedem Institute at University of Gothenburg. Vedem are world leading in measuring democracy around the world, so let's get a warm hand to Staffan Lindberg.
Thank you. Thank you. And a pleasure to be here and see all your teachers. My grandfather was a teacher, my grandmother was a teacher, my mother was a teacher, my stepdad was a teacher, and I'm a teacher at university, so it's great to be here. Are you ready for a crash course? 31 million data in 15 minutes. Okay. How autocratization is threatening our world. Democracy trumped. I hope you enjoy the pun. So it's based on this year's report from the Vidam Institute that Maria also referenced, 25 years of autocratization. So it's been a long while now that the world has been in an increasing wave of autocratization, the opposite to democratization. Where are we in the world? So here we are. This is the world. It's a lot of red. A lot more red in that map now than 25 years ago. Okay? How did we get there? So now you in the back, bring out your binoculars, okay? So the last 50 years of the world on our liberal democracy index, this wave of democratization that started in 1974 with Carnation Revolution in Portugal. 25th of April 1974. A coup by junior military officers. Then people went out in the streets and took it over. And it became democratization. It's an important lesson. Lots of people in the street. Throughout this wave, end of the Cold War, lots of more democracy and freedom of expression and so on in the world. And then sort of a decline there. Not that much. This is country averages. Right? Each country weighs as much. It's a normal metric you often see for global trends. But there's a problem with that. One of the problems is that the Seychelles out there in the Indian Ocean, with 90,000 inhabitants, weigh as much as India with 1.4 billion people. And in terms of how much democracy we have in the world, does Seychelles weigh as much as India or China or Russia? Maybe not. And then democracy is ruled by the people, right? One man, one vote. Now women are part of this. It's great, huh? So one person, one vote. So we can weigh that by that metric and think of it as the level of democracy enjoyed by the average global citizen. And then it looks like that. Boom. The decline starts much earlier and has gone much greater. By that metric, we're back to 1985, the year that Gorbachev came to power in Soviet Union. We can also weigh it by territory. It's the same thing, much more of a decline starting earlier. And then look at this, by GDP. Boom. That graph tells you something about how much democracy is losing out in the world in terms of financial power. And that makes me really afraid. Not the least of what's going on now in the United States. We'll come back to that in a second. We often use the population-weighted measures because of their relationship to democracy as well. We also do this. So we take the same underlying indicators, 48 indicators go into that liberal democracy index. Lots of stuff you need to have democracy. But then divide it into these sort of regime types, like, so you have the really bad dictatorships, Eritrea, and so on. You have electoral autocracies. They hold multi-party elections on paper, like Russia or Turkey, but they're not good enough to be democracies. Maria, Philippines is part of that, right? Or Orban's Hungary. Then you have this sort of okay democracies, right? And then you have the really good democracies over there, Uruguay or South Korea, Estonia, so on. Then the world looks like this over the past 50 years in terms of people living in these. And then we have at least 25 years where the share of the world population has increased in terms of living in autocracies, right? And now 3 out of 4 almost people in the world live in non-democracies. It's a huge increase in this past 2 decades or so. Okay, then which countries are right now in change, right? Right now, in ongoing episodes, looks like this. The point of showing this, so blue ones are democratizing. Brazil, good, turn around. Poland, great with Donald Tusk. Red ones are autocratizing. And the depth of the color is sort of the magnitude of change. It's a global trend. That's the point of showing this. No region is spared. That should also tell you that there are some global drivers. There are 45 countries right now autocratizing. Over the last 50 years, it looks like this. So we have again 1974 here, the beginning of democratization, right? And there, 71 countries at the same time were democratizing. That's when we were happy, right? We enjoyed, we were looking forward to the future. Well, everything was getting better. And oh, boom. And meanwhile, somewhere here in the 90s, this number of countries autocratizing started to go up, and you can see it's really increasing there. There's never been more countries autocratizing at the same time than now. This is worse than the 1930s. The number of countries have increased. There's never been such a great share of the countries in the world autocratizing at the same time. It's also worse than the 1930s on that metric. And this is another scary statistic. So, you know, some electoral autocracies can also autocratize, get worse, right? But of the 45 that are right now in change, 27 were democracies when they started. Almost 70% have already broken down. We've looked at this for the entire data series that we have from 1900 to the present. Then that is almost 80%. So just the statistical probability that if a country like the United States starts to autocratize, which I would say it has in the last 8 weeks, that democracy will survive is very low. And I want to spend a couple of minutes just on this. Maria already touched on this, but the relationship between increasing spread of disinformation, increasing polarization, and then autocratization is incredibly strong. We can look at it different ways. We can look at simple, just comparisons of means. The red one, autocratizing countries, government spread of disinformation go up. Democratizing countries, it goes down. Political polarization, same thing. Right? Simple comparison of means. We can look at this on country level. So we have this graph, 2 graphs here. Government disinformation to the left. Last 10 years, from 2014 to 24, if you're above the line, it's gotten more in those 10 years. Red marked countries up there are autocratizing countries. Blue here, democratizing countries. Polarization, same thing. It's gotten more worse, and the autocratizing countries are up there. We can look at it within country over time, and it looks like this. So you have Hungary there, for example. Indicators of polarization and government spread of disinformation go up, democracy goes down. This is incredibly strong relationships. Now, wannabe autocrats spread disinformation because they know it works. It works in at least 2 ways. First, you spread hundreds of stories to undermine the notion of truth. So we as human beings, we don't really know what to believe or who to believe. That opens up for the great leader to have the truth and us believing it. Then you spread this information about your opponents, whether they are politicians, media, academics, or people like Maria and so on, to make them, when you can start to talk about them as enemies. Enemies of who we are. Enemies of our way of life. And the kicker, enemies of the nation. What do you do with enemies of the nation? If you can get a big enough part of the population to believe in that, you get support, you get legitimacy for closing down their media outlets or their civil society organizations, throw some of them in jail like Erdogan likes to do, take over their media like Orban likes to do, and so on. So it's really, really, this is such a big part of the story of autocratization in the past 25 years. And then last few minutes on the United States. I just came back from DC Wednesday. So there was autocratization in the US under Trump in his first term. Then it revived a little bit under Biden. Now, in just 8 weeks, we've seen it. Well, we wrote this 3 weeks ago, so it's the first 5 weeks. It's almost been a total attack on democracy. So it's like doing what Modi did in India, what Putin started in 2000s in Russia, what Erdogan has done in Turkey, Orban in Hungary, Vučić in Serbia, we can go down the line, Duterte, much of it in Philippines, at the same time. Lots of attacks on the rule of law. There are about 200 lawsuits right now against the government, about 30 of them involving breaking the Constitution. Going after law firms, threatening judges, speaking about impeaching them. The Proud Boys are already threatening their lives and their families. Right? A whole host of things happening at the same time. Then we have abolition of accountability institutions. So undermining power of the Congress, undermining other institutions like inspector generals, firing all of them. I can go down the list. There's a lot of that happening. Purges in the military, also really scary, in putting his personal loyalists in the top positions of the military. And then starting attacks on freedom of the media, threatening to withdraw licenses, threatening journalists. And now I would expand that to other freedom of speech actors, including Maria teaching at Columbia. Columbia has already caved in. It's like a big irony that Maria is teaching there. They have caved in and given up to Trump's demands, although they're a private university institution. Johns Hopkins has also given up. So this goes much wider than just the media these days, all kinds of freedom of speech actors. It's starting to look like that. People I met, even colleagues, university professors from reputable institutions in the DC area, when I meet with them, just have coffee, they scan the environment. They want to move away if somebody comes and sits close because they are afraid of being listened to. People who used to work or working in government still haven't been fired. Before they talk, wait, let me take my phone, government phone, and turn it off. It feels like I've been to many authoritarian countries. It feels like that. All these actions and many things that have happened in the last 3 weeks, adding to what we wrote about in the report, to me, studying autocratization for such a long time, and all these other countries that have followed sort of a playbook, now Trump is doing that playbook, but all at the same time. To me, it's very clear what this is about. It's about concentrating power in the executive, preferably one person, Trump, and expanding the reach of that executive office to take over power from Congress, from the courts, from other accountability institutions, So it's all power in one man's hand. And that's sort of the definition of autocracy. Having fun yet? Okay, everything is available on the website. This is a VDM website, including sort of online tools you can delve into. Your students can delve into 31 million data without knowing anything about statistics. And thank you for listening.
Thank you, Staffan. Now it's time for another guest, so over to you, Karin.
Thank you. Yes, it sure is. You are so warmly welcome to us, Berit Reiss-Andersen. A warm hand. With a pen. So, you are a lot of things. You are a lawyer, you're a politician, author, and you have also been the, just up until recently, the chairman of the Nobel Peace Prize Committee in Norway.
That
and
is correct.
As such, you have decided on the Peace Prize laureates. Sounds fun, sounds a bit tricky. What are the what are the challenges? Because you have the entire world to choose between.
Well, the challenge is really defining what is peace. The challenge is identifying the criteria of peace as defined in Alfred Nobel's will to promote fraternity or disarmament, or this very old-fashioned clause of promoting peace congresses, which was very much in mode in the 1800s, but that is by a long-time interpretation of the committee really understood as institutions that can secure peace. So the simple answer is the difficult position of when you make a choice, you always also contribute with a definition, what is peace?
And there have been, several connections throughout the years to peace. For example, in the prize motivation to Maria Ressa and Dmitry Muratov in 2021, it said that, again, then freedom of expression is a precondition of democracy and lasting peace.
Yes.
In what way would you say that democracy is connected to peace?
Well, peace, very roughly, can be two different things. It can be the end of war and armed conflict, and several Nobel Prizes have been awarded to end conflict. But the end of conflict is not peace, because peace is more than that atrocities and the armed action has ended. You have to make a sustainable peace where you protect the society of when a new conflict comes up, that it is solved with war. And that is where democracy comes in. Researchers, peace research has a very clear understanding that they call the doctrine of the democratic peace, that societies that have democracy don't go to war against each other, or they don't go to war against autocratic states as a main rule. And that is why it is also important when defining peace and democracy, what are the pillars of a democracy? And I think it was bringing in a new understanding with the prize to Maria Ressa and Dmitry Muratov, that can you even imagine a democracy without free speech? Because free speech is not only the right of the citizen to have an opinion, but the right to criticize power, the right to question what is truth without being repressed, because that is what we're seeing today a lot, is that exercising free speech is met with repressive action, being ridiculed, that people go after you, that it can have consequences for your professional career and your public image, but also, you know, that what was the question again now? You know, I'm a lawyer. I just talk and talk.
No, but you definitely gave us the point. Thank you. I'm also thinking, because you said defining peace, but there is also a wide range how you could define war. And there are many Nobel Prizes that shows that war can be fought with other things than guns and bombs. There is prizes to the World Food Programme, Nadia Murad, Denis Mukwege. Could you elaborate a little bit on the different ways that, the methods that are used in war?
Definitely. There's, you know, the disarmament prizes are really prizes to making wars less gruesome. And we have, through the peace prizes, supported weapon bans, like with nuclear weapons, of course, which are existential, but also cluster weapons, chemical weapons, etc., that have little purpose but cause a lot of suffering. But really, and also the prize to Denis Mukwege and Muratov, we, you know, it could have been understood as a prize to sort of doing well, repairing the suffering of war, but it was really a prize underscoring that using women as weapons of war and using sexual abuse as weapons of war is a pariah online with cluster weapons and chemical weapons. But speaking of democracy, what is really the understanding is that, first of all, rule of law is the cornerstone of democracy, is equally important as freedom of speech. And I always call rule of law as the invisible power in democracy. It's not what we really vote about. It's not what we really think about. But when it's not there, it's a catastrophe. So what is rule of law? It's part of the checks and balances of power, because courts can control power, but it's also ensures the citizens access to justice, somewhere to go to settle disputes. Who owns this piece of land? Where does my land end and your land begin? Can the state really say that I'm not allowed to wear a hijab? I want to have that tried by courts. How are you treated under a criminal charge? Are you just convicted because it's convenient? Is it really a trial based on evidence and truth? But even more, law is, you know, states will always have conflicts. That is inevitable. And we need mechanisms where states can actually settle disputes in another way than by going to war, or minorities in a country that are fighting for their freedoms, their rights, that they can settle their issues without becoming turning to armed conflict. And you might think this is utopia, but in the past 100 years, 150 years, this mechanism has in fact been developed, mostly during the past 80 years, since UN banned war for all practical purposes. But we have international courts, we have mediation mechanisms in place. There are places to go to settle disputes. And fun fact is that in, I can't remember the year exactly now, in the late 20s, I think, Norway had the idea of occupying Greenland. It's not a new thought in international politics, but it was before the UN, but the forerunner of the International Court of Justice, ruled that Norway did not have a claim on Greenland. And that was that. So it is possible.
Well, the Nobel Prizes in general, they are always questioned by some. You can for sure dislike a specific authorship, or you can, different fractions can question science for all sorts of reasons. But when it comes to the Peace Prize, I mean...
everybody's an expert.
Yes, and you will definitely get some criticism. I mean, I guess there are... You can get this from the public, but when you award persons that are, for example, imprisoned, like Ales Bialiatski in Belarus or Narges Mohammadi in Iran, I mean, you can foresee that the regimes will not approve of your selection. I know this is a bit of a tricky comment because your working processes are very confidential, but on a general note, how do you think about this? When you, I mean, there are governments, regimes, there are dictators, the world is a blur.
Well, it's very easy to answer that question because we welcome debate and criticism about the Peace Prize. The Peace Prize is the most prestigious prize in the world, and we're criticized for everything, for selecting the wrong candidate too early, too soon, too late. And I think this kind of criticism really keeps the prize alive, because this is not mathematical, you know, it's a discretional decision finally made by 5 individuals. And I think if you imagine that we just years after gave a prize to peace in Northern Ireland, it would be sort of, yeah, so what? What is new? We know it's peace there. But also the criticism by regimes, Liu Xiaobo prize, the Human Rights Prize to the Chinese dissident, disturbed relations between Norway and China for more than a decade. Putin has expressed that peace prizes involving Muratov and later the organization Memorial was an attack on Russia, etc. But that is also criticism that we welcome because it highlights the purpose of the prize. What these states who criticize us, what are they in fact defending? Are they defending that they have put Ales Bialiatski literally in a hole in a prison basement for years for expressing human rights values? So I don't fear criticism. I think that is wonderful. It keeps the prize alive. See how I responded to that without breaking the confidentiality?
Yes, you did. Very good. So in 2014, perhaps not one of the most criticized prizes went to Malala Yousafzai and to Kailash Satyarthi. And this is a prize that enlightens children and their right to education. So what is the connection, education, peace?
Yeah, well, the prize actually highlighted slavery, child slavery, slavery in general, and education as a remedy against slavery, because it's that vicious circle of many families in underdeveloped economies that you have to use child labor as a way of sustaining the family. And education is really the remedy. We try to look at the root of the problem. So we felt an enormous relief when we got the idea of connecting Kailash's anti-slavery program and his relief of child laborers and Malala's representing young people all over the globe fighting for education and making a new connection. And that is a successful Peace Prize in my mind, when we connect known facts in a new manner to highlight the problems and saying sustainable peace is really also about educated citizens of a democracy that can have a critical mind of what is true and what is false and be a voice in a democracy that is a developed democracy.
That's a good note to end at. Such a joy having you here, Berit, Reiss-Andersen. A warm hand.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, welcome back. In 1983, the Nobel laureate in economics, Wassily Leontief, made a prediction. He said that just like horses had been replaced by tractors on the farm, humans would be replaced by computers in the office. This was 40 years ago, and sometimes when we hear these old predictions about the future, we tend to laugh about them because they seem exaggerated, or, you know, what did they know back then? But when it comes to AI and computers, it seems like we're already living in the future, and we're not so sure that it's something to laugh about. And when it comes to AI and the future of democracy, well, maybe it's not about the future. Maybe it's about how AI is changing the world as we speak. And who better to tell us more about this than a professor in responsible AI? Please join me in welcoming Virginia Dignum.
Hi. Hi, hello. Thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you all for being here. Yes, AI, and what is AI doing to our democracies and to our world? Nowadays, no one is really unknown. Everybody knows of AI. All of you, has anyone never used AI? Indeed. 40 years ago when I started, I had to explain, and people would laugh at me what strange thing it was that. But anyway, AI. We are led to believe that to do AI, to get AI to be able to do whatever we expect it to do, we need more data, we need more computational power, and we need more algorithmic power. So we need more and more and more. That's what we are led to believe. That's what big tech is telling us. That's what the corporations are telling us. That's also what our governments are telling us. But what happens when we do, or how are we getting to more data, more computing power, more algorithmic power? This is the data that AI is using. It's an image from 2022. If anything, today, the skewedness of the world is even more than that. It's not only that the world is skewed, but also that 50% of these data sets are in the hands of 12 organizations, 10 of which are in North America. And now it's a slide with a lot of, sorry, let's make this work. How do these algorithms work? And I have a lot of text there, and I apologize for that. But basically what I'm saying there is that AI does a lot of hard, crunching work to take decisions. AI does it in a completely different way than we do. The intelligence in AI is a completely different type of intelligence than our own intelligence. And yes, we might be replacing tractors by horses, but like the tractors and horses, the tractor is completely different from the horse. AI is completely different from us. I don't think it's going to replace us. It's going to extend and to combine our capabilities, what we're doing. But at the end of the day, AI is very good at playing chess, at solving problems which are very well designed. But if we want AI to solve our complex problems of the world, we do need to combine our abilities with it. And finally, how is AI in the world? We see this again and again in the news. AI is using the energy that we would need for other other goals. AI is using the water. AI is using and impacting on our sustainable development goals. And AI, of course, is using money and economical resources that could go somewhere else, maybe. So it's not so much an idea of more and more and more, but we really need to be aware of what this more and more and more means. And indeed, and it's not, I'm not a democracy expert, I'm not a political expert, I'm a computer scientist. But indeed, we can see, and we have seen in the last few years, many signs in which AI can potentially be used and is being used to really attack our democracies. AI is enabling private companies to take over control, surveillance, and infrastructures. AI is being enable corporations and private companies to take over the information that we receive, the interactions between us and our governments and other democratic institutions. And AI is powering authoritarian regimes to control and to impact our human rights in many different ways. However, and that is important, whatever AI is doing is not a fault of AI. It is our responsibility. AI doesn't happen by itself, and that's maybe one of the biggest fallacies that we are led to believe. AI doesn't happen to us. It's not the weather. It's not something that we cannot control. It's not something that we can only address the results of what AI is doing. AI is willed by us, people, is determined by us, people, is developed by us, people. We are in control. All of us, also us, the simple citizens of the world, we have a voice and we have a capability to decide how those systems are developed, are used, how we are using these systems, how we are trading facility of use for democratic responsibility. It is on all of us. We need to start asking and demanding those in power to ask what we call the question zero. And we will do that in the breakout sessions later on. Is AI the best option in any of the many types of sectors and problems that we are using? Are we taking the easy shortcut, or are we really addressing what the problems are? AI doesn't exist in a vacuum. AI takes place in a social, technical environment, and we cannot expect technology, computation, to solve all the problems that we are introducing by creating and developing this type of systems. So the solutions, the approaches, the regulation, the responsibility for AI needs to be a social thing and not just left or hoped that technology will solve it. This is again, forget, it is important governance, and why is it important? Like we don't expect or we don't allow cars without brakes to go into our roads. We don't allow those cars to be driven by people without driver's license, and we don't take these cars in roads without traffic rules. AI has no brakes, AI has no driver's license, AI has happens in roads without traffic rules. We really need to start looking at the governance, because without governance, without rules, without somehow to decide what should and what shouldn't be done, no one is going to win, and definitely not us, the users and impacted by these systems. There is a lot of work being done there. It's not like there is no work. The latest one is work done by the United Nations, of which I had the honor to participate. So there is a lot of principles and guidelines. But with principles and guidelines alone, we don't get there. It is easy to say we want AI to be fair, we want AI to be aligned with human rights and so on. You give these requirements to a computer developer, and how is the computer developer decide or evaluate or determine determine that whatever they are programming is aligned with human rights. So we need to do much more than just coming out with principles and guidelines. There are many risks. Some risks are much more long-term, other ones are happening now already. We see every day issues of bias, issues of discrimination, issues of privacy, issues of misinformation, issues of job loss. There is a lot happening now. But we can do something. We can work and demand stronger rules and oversight. We can and should be participating. We all need, and especially you as teachers, need to educate a new generation that it's able to understand what are these systems, what can they do, especially what they cannot do, and participate in the discussion around how do we want AI to be used and support and benefit our societies, because there is a lot as well that can benefit. And finally, responsible AI is not a choice. There is not a choice between irresponsible AI and responsible AI. Regulation and governance is not against innovation. Is more, if anything, is the stepping stone for innovation. So every time someone will tell you that it's great to talk about ethics and the nice fluffy stuff, but at the end of the day we need to innovate and we need to rush to the best new system, it is not true. Without responsibility, without ethics, without concern for environment and for people and society, AI will not get nowhere. So we only get there if we work together on responsible AI. Thank you.
Thank you. We will hear more from Virginia shortly. Our next speaker is a writer, a philosopher, and a member of the Swedish Academy of Literature. She has written books about alternative facts. I'll give you a hint, she's not a big fan. She's also written books about democracy, so a perfect guest for today. So please welcome Åsa Wikforss to the stage.
Thanks so much. A great honor to be here. Just so you know, there are no alternative facts. Remember that. I'm not just not a fan. They don't exist. All right. So I thought, since I am a philosopher, I thought I'd have a little philosophy session, right? Now that democracy is in such grave danger across the world, it's really important that we ask ourselves the question why it matters. That is to say, why is democracy valuable? Why is it so important that we defend democracy? Now, typically traditional people, when they get asked that question, they will say something about the procedures of democracy. Political equality, we all get to vote. And that's all great, and that's the foundation of democracy. But it's important not to forget the actual substantive consequences, benefits that democracies bring. So they tend to produce calamities of various, to avoid calamities of various sorts. There's never been a famine in a democracy. Fascinating. Democracies don't start wars with other democracies. That falls all on autocracies. Democracies also enhance human well-being along several dimensions that we care about: health, life expectancy, happiness. Happiness survey just came out. The democracies are all in top. Sweden is number 4 in the world now, I think. Pretty good. They provide better protections for the environment, and they handle crises better, which we learned during COVID, although everybody said, look at China, it's so great. It didn't end up being that great, right? If you're interested in the data, look at VDEM. As always, they have a case for democracy report where there's a lot of data on this. Now, as a philosopher, I'm interested in why this is the case. Why do democracies reliably produce all this good stuff? And why do autocracies always fail to do that? And the answer lies in knowledge. That democratic governance has epistemic strengths that no other existing system has. In democracy, we are uniquely capable of making knowledge-based decisions, and this produces these outcomes. And if you look at it more theoretically, philosophically, why Why do democracies produce more knowledge-based decisions? Well, one is the voting mechanisms. We all have knowledge, lots and lots of knowledge and experience. And when we vote, that knowledge goes into our voting. And when tons of people vote, the collective result tends to approach truth. That's even mathematically something you can look at. That's collective intelligence. But the other thing about democracy, the other reason it goes well when democracies function the way they should, is that we have public debates, public deliberations. Because we have freedom of speech and free media and academic freedom, we can debate, we disagree on many things, but we can debate, and our collective decision-making ends up being more knowledge-based than in an autocracy where you cannot have these things. And that, of course, is the answer. The reason autocracies don't do so well along these dimensions is precisely they do what they can to oppress truth, oppress knowledge in various ways. This, as you may know, is the Senate House in London, which was the inspiration for Orwell's Ministry of Truth. I was there recently, it's my picture, I was there recently on a conference on post-truth, so that's kind of funny. But of course, remember what it said on the Ministry of Truth in the book. It said, war is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. That's newspeak for you. Ignorance is strength is so key to the autocracy because ignorance is what the autocratic leaders need so they can hold on to powers, right? Now, so we know this about the value of democracy, but you do wonder a little bit when you see some of these surveys. This was Open Society Barometer from 2023. Especially among young people, it looks not so great. Only 53% thought democracy was preferable to any other system. And a full 42% of younger people thought that military rule would be a great idea. 42%. Now, some of this comes from countries where people don't have a strong democratic tradition, so they don't know. But look at that. US and France, 29% of the young people think a military rule would be a good idea. What do they know about what it's like to live in an autocracy? What do they know about the value of democracy? This is a lack of knowledge. Now, the worries about democracy, I mean, the strengths of democracy, these facts that we produce good outcomes because it's knowledge-based, derive from the fact that we are all involved. But the very, very same fact also makes democracy really vulnerable. Why is that? Well, precisely because we are vulnerable. We are vulnerable to manipulation, to propaganda, to disinformation of various kinds. And then things don't go well. Plato was very skeptical of democracy. Now, democracy in Athens was very different from what we have today, but still, they had a version of it. He was very skeptical because he feared that people are too ignorant. And if you give the power to the people, they will vote, they will fall for a demagogue who will introduce tyranny. There's been a lot of quoting of Plato lately in the US, I can tell you. He thought the philosophers should rule instead. No, not a good idea. So here we are now, where our vulnerabilities are being exploited to a maximum in order to harm democracy. It's been a lot of talk, and since 2016 there's been a lot of talk about the truth crisis. Now, philosophically that's not a great concept, because truth, what we believe and what we say about the world, is true or false whether we like it or not. Truth is not up to us. So truth will do just fine without us. The problem is us not tending to believe what's true, right? And why is that suddenly? Well, our psychology is the same. That hasn't changed. That's Stone Age. What has changed is something we're incredibly vulnerable to, and that's the quality of the information landscape. So in a big research program that I've led the last 6 years on knowledge resistance, the media and information scholars have studied this, and they conceptualize the new information environment as a high-choice information environment, which means that the choice of sources fall increasingly upon you as an individual. And what happens then, of course, is that your personal biases and motivations and desires will drive your news and your information consumption in a way that wasn't true before when we had a low-choice information landscape. This has affected people's trust. People shift trust from reliable sources to unreliable sources. And, of course, we have the fact that because of the lack of gatekeepers, we have a huge spread of mis and disinformation. This is just a description of the media landscape. Add to that the technology, of course, the design of the platforms, the algorithms that are designed to keep us there. Not to promote truth, but to keep us there. And what keeps us there? Well, it's not the true and the nuanced and the well-grounded. It's the sensational, the stuff that scares us and so on. So there we go. This is uniquely, I mean, every time we get new technology, democracy is in danger. We've seen this before with the radio, newspapers. Early on in technology, there's a real danger zone, and we're there now. And this is the most dangerous information environment ever because of the technological aspects of possibilities of manipulation. Now, there are many dangerous falsehoods and lies around there, but among the most dangerous are those that are, scholars call them corrosive falsehoods, that are used to undermine trust in reliable procedures and sources of knowledge. To undermine trust in journalism and research, to cause hostility to reasoned arguments, efforts to use good arguments and not just scream at each other. And they promote the belief that it's fruitless to seek the truth. And this many of you recognize probably is Hannah Arendt, 20th century great philosopher who studied totalitarian societies in various ways. And she said, always stressed, that the goal of the totalitarian society is not necessarily to get you become convinced of like Nazism or communism or what it is. It is to make you not believe anything and just give up and become passive. And not believe that truth is possible and that knowledge is possible. That's epistemic cynicism. It's the development that happened in Russia now, of course, again. What can we do? There will be a lot of very hands-on tools today, and you should all discuss and think about. I just want to say a few very general things about this. First of all, teach your students not to give up on knowledge. Knowledge is possible. It's possible to find out what's true and false. Don't teach your students to become epistemic cynics. And that's very important to keep in mind when you do source criticism, because there's been some studies showing that students are now cynical, they don't trust any sources. That's a disaster. That shouldn't be the goal. Teach them about the nature and value of democracy. We shouldn't have 29% of young people in a democracy saying that military rule would be a good idea. Teach them about the dangers of the information environment. Teach them about not just avoiding bad sources, but what characterizes a reliable source? Why should we trust science? You should teach them a good answer to that question, and there are very good answers in books about it. And to, of course, teach them about society and its history. Always, these autocratic leaders go after the history of a society. There's revisionism about history, and Staffan was just telling me just now that there's a major effort to go after the Smithsonian Institute in Washington by the Trump administration now, to rewrite history. Knowledge protects knowledge. There's your big task. Finally, knowledge is necessary for democracy. Democracy will go under without knowledge, but it's not sufficient. We need something else. We also need to teach our students the fundamental values of democracy. So I'm going to end with a picture of my favorite philosopher. Well, I love Hannah Arendt too, but here he is, Bertrand Russell. Tolerance, a foundational value for democracy. And this quote is one of many beautiful quotes from Russell. He also won the Nobel Prize in literature. The thing above all that a teacher should endeavor to produce in his pupils, if democracy is to survive, is a kind of tolerance that springs from an endeavor to understand those who are different from ourselves. And being a member of the Swedish Academy, I want to stress the role of literature in allowing us to understand those who are different from ourselves. Thank you very much.
So thank you also. About Well, actually a little bit more than 50 years ago, the Swedish Nobel laureate Hanna wrote The Tale of the Big Computer Machine, a science fiction story about how society is changed when a supercomputer replaces the government. He's actually ambivalent whether or not this would be a good idea, but, well, let's start there. What do you think? Could and should a supercomputer replace the government? Why couldn't it?
Why should it?
Well, because it seems like we're not doing too good of a job.
But the computer is not going to do any different than us. What AI, what computer reasoning is done, is based on the data that we provided. If anything, we need to make sure that the data, the interactions, the ways we live are such that then when we give it to a computer to compute some decisions based on that, those decisions are aligned with what we want. But we cannot expect that a miracle occurs and we do whatever mess we want and somehow the computer comes up with a different approach. And if it comes with a different approach, then it's also a question then if we are behaving in a certain way and then we hope this type of machine to take over and tell us how to do better, it's a matter of education, probably. Why are we not really teaching ourselves how to do better and putting all the hope on some kind of external thing which will then do it for us? I think that's when democracy will die, because then it's not our own interaction, our own decisions anymore.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like a really bad idea. I mean, look, like you were saying, a computer, AI, I mean, they need goals. Right? It's not just you feed in information, you tell them what the goals should be. Who's going to determine that? The computer? No, that's not going to work. It's going to be someone. So we need, I mean, you can use AI as a tool, we can talk about that. And this is related to a question that sometimes comes up, and there's even a philosopher who's written a book, Against Democracy, he calls it, saying that it would be better if we had a rule of experts. Because people are so ignorant. Look what's happening. It would be better to let the experts decide everything. Now, that's also a very bad idea, actually, and for the very same reasons, because experts are great at, you know, their little area of expertise. That's good. But two things. Governing requires a lot more than that. But also, who's going to decide the goals of what they decide? Right? Experts are not experts on values. The wonderful thing about democracy is that we decide the goals. Then you need expertise in order to accomplish those goals. That's why it's so important to have independent expert authorities where the politicians go and say, look, we want to do this, we want to fight COVID. What's the best way to do it? Experts can tell you that. But what the politics wants, the goals of politics should be determined by the people. So, yeah, not a machine.
No.
So even if we provide the machine with goals, well, maybe that it could work. It could help us how to achieve the goals, but we could use experts who are not computers for that as well.
We can absolutely, and experts will use computers for that purpose. So as a tool again, but we need to be clear about what the goals of our politics is, and that's up to us.
And indeed, then the computer can help us determine or support us reaching those goals. But the goals, like you say, it's our goals. And if we don't work on our goals, then it's not a computer is going to do it.
And sometimes also when people are very much in favor of AI and they say that it sort of comfort some, well, when they hear criticism, they say, well, it's not going to replace us, it's just a tool. But is that neutral? Is it a neutral tool?
Tools are never neutral. I'm left-handed, I cannot use a scissors like right-handed people can use. So even a simple tool like that is not neutral. Tools come with affordances, and those affordances are again determined by goals, by what is this tool going to help us do, and who is this tool going to help. And those goals, those decisions are taken by when you are developing the tool. And with AI is exactly the same. What are we going to use AI for? Who is going to benefit from the use of AI? Who is going to be involved in the decision of determine what are the values, what are the requirements, what are the constraints that this system needs to do? That's where we all have to be participating, because we build the tools, and the tools are built for what the goals we want them to achieve, and they are not neutral. They are not. There is a say that technology is not good or not bad, but at the same, that's true. But at the same time, it is not neutral. It comes with the values that we build into the affordance we give to this technology.
Yeah, I mean. Right, so we've always invented tools to make things easier for us. That's, muscle strength tools and so on. Now it's brain strength tools. And that's fine too, as long as it really is just a tool. But when it's the risk here, of course, that everybody's pointing to, apart from, the use of AI for disinformation, all that. The risk here is that we start using AI for so many more things that our brains used to do, that our brains won't function properly in the end. Because the brain is also a muscle. It needs to be trained. So, for example, analysis and critical thinking skills, if we put those on AI, first of all, can we trust them? But even if we could trust them completely, it means that we get worse at doing those very basic tasks of thinking and you're doing an analysis. And critical thinking, the goal of critical thinking is to assessing, do I have good reasons to believe this? And you don't want to put that effort all on a machine, because if you're not capable in the end of answering the question, do I have good reasons to believe this, then you're totally in the hands of AI, and that's going to end very badly. So critical thinking skills may atrophy if we do it too much.
I'm not sure if I agree. Indeed, if we do use AI wrongly, it might atrophiate our critical thinking. But think about a calculator, and I suppose several of you will be mathematics teachers. And the introduction of the calculator into education a couple of decades ago led to the same type of discussions. Our students will not be able to do arithmetic anymore themselves because they rely on the calculator. It is true, and indeed hardly anyone nowadays will be able to calculate a square root by hand, but it's also maybe a freedom at the same time. So we learned to teach arithmetic and to use arithmetic tools in a different way that frees the time that we would take to calculate the square root by hand, to really think about what are we doing? What is this calculation about? What are the options that we have? So I think that indeed there might be a risk that we are going to use our critical thinking capabilities worse, but there is also a big possibility and a big opportunity to use the critical thinking where the critical thinking is really needed, and leave some of the, let's say, the simpler decisions to the machines. But again, we need to understand what we can do with this new calculator that we have developed now, and how can we integrate that in the best way in education, such that it supports the students reaching a higher level of critical thinking.
No, I mean, totally. It's all a question of how we do it, right? But there is a danger. I mean, they're already seeing that people, I mean, there's data showing, there's a new study showing that critical thinking skills have gone down among people who are in a work situation, use AI tools a lot. So that's just a fact. I mean, that is a danger. And to guard against that, we have to be very aware, like you're saying, use the AI to do the sort of menial tasks, the ones that would just take time and wouldn't really improve or deepen our thinking skills. But make sure not to let AI do. Well, I mean, people have AI doing analysis of texts and writing emails and all that. Some of that is innocuous. Some is not so. And in the schools, it's going to be absolute key to use AI in the right way so we don't lose our critical thinking skills.
Yeah. It might be, maybe there's a difference in the fact that when the calculator, we know how a calculator figures out the square root of 25 or something like that, more than we know. I'm thinking about last year the Nobel Prize for Chemistry went to the development of a AlphaFold 2, a program that can predict protein structure, which is complex, but the point is we don't know how it does this. we don't know the rules of how these proteins are folded. So the computer really thinks different from us.
Yes, computers think different. Computers develop results different from us. I wouldn't want to use the word thinking with computers. Okay. It's a different thing. We don't. It is kind of, we do understand and we don't understand. So we understand how we build these systems, and they are basically statistical machines. They will identify patterns based on correlation between many, many different factors. So many that we cannot really ourselves deal with it, but we understand the basics of what these machines do. At the same time, when we put it all together and we combine so many billions of different statistical correlations, it becomes very difficult to understand how it works. But there is also one of the points in which we need to stop and think. Do we trust those that are using these machines to take the responsibility when things go wrong because they are relying in systems that they don't fully understand? And what are the kind of safeguards or guardrails that we are going to put around the use of these systems? Because if the system works and helps us folding proteins and does it in a correct way, great, we really advance science. But if the system starts doing it or generating alternative facts or fake alternative falsities that we don't know anymore where one thing starts and the other, then we do need to demand the responsibility. Also in the protein folding, if the protein folding goes wrong, someone, some organization, some person needs to be responsible. And it's not really demeaning at all the complexity and the power of this type of systems, but it's not just, okay, now we know how to, the system does something, we don't understand what it is, it seems to do it well, so go ahead. No, we do need to do that with guardrails. We need to have this combination between our own responsibility and what we are using these systems for. We cannot just drop it all on the machine and say, sorry, the computer said so.
Yeah, I mean, the black box problem is a big problem, right? There's a handful of people who truly understand this in the world. But I think it's a particular problem also in the context of democracy, because increasingly authorities are using AI to make routine decisions. People don't really know why decisions were made in a certain way. And that's no good. When people complain about the decisions or appeal them, they want reasons. And then it's no good to say, well, the AI outputted this. That doesn't work. Yeah. So that's a concern too.
Yeah.
Well, and obviously a concern that, bringing back your point, that democracies work better. I mean, what you get then, you get these sort of arbitrary decisions that are characteristic for autocracies, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they're not arbitrary, but we'd like to know the reasons. That's the thing about human beings. We want reasons for actions and reasons for beliefs, and that sets us apart. And if that goes under, then indeed we end up with autocracy.
Let's see, Sara, do we have any questions from our teachers?
Plenty of them, and I think we should go back to the classroom. You were into this a little bit, but take it again. I want my students to make an effort and not take the easiest way out. To me, AI is a threat to this. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I tell my students these days, I want them to write by hand, take notes by hand in the classroom. There are efforts that have to be made. Absolutely. Teach them to use AI like they use a calculator. That's okay. To do these things that don't require these central strengths of critical thinking.
Yeah, I think that we are at the ideal moment to rethink our education. We cannot roll back the way the AI that it's available now with all the problems and errors and mistakes and the impact of it. We cannot put the genie back in the bottle. We need to look at how are we going to use it, these systems in education. I know already from people that really encourage, in one end, the students to use generative AI to generate essays or to generate answers, and then the point is to discuss with the students and to teach the students exactly the critical thinking to be able to understand what would I have done, what this system did, what will this system do in another if I input a different type of prompt. It can help the discussion, it can help the understanding of a complex situation, but it's not, again, it's not a matter, and that I think is what we do need to combat, is not replacing the learning of the students. It is a tool that students can help, and we need to help them understand what this tool can do, what this tool cannot do, and what are the dangers of using this tool, like any other tool.
Thank you. This is a bit of a different question, and I think it's a bit funny. When Newton got the apple in his head, he made a complex conclusion about gravity. Can AI come to abstract conclusion like this?
AI can help us take those conclusions. AI itself will not be able to take the conclusion. It will output probably many different similar conclusions, but it's up to us to see the apple in between all the mushrooms.
Yeah, and let's not forget that Newton had a lot of training, a lot of knowledge when that apple hit his head.
Exactly.
It's against the background of acquired knowledge that new ideas come up. To be creative, you need knowledge. We need to remember that.
Yeah.
He was terrible at chemistry. He did alchemy. Why? Because chemistry was not a developed field at that point. There wasn't knowledge there. So to be creative, you have to have knowledge, and you should tell your students that, because if they think that they can just be creative and then put out the knowledge tasks on the computers, they are very, very, very wrong.
Yeah. And one important thing is knowledge is different from data. The machine will, what we expect nowadays, and we take as truth nowadays, is a machine that looks at 1 billion of movies of apples falling and then somehow approximate the equation of gravity by statistical correlation of these movies. We don't need to do that. We do have the knowledge, Newton gave us the knowledge about how the gravity equations work, when they work, when they don't work. So we shouldn't be too quick at all to replace knowledge by data that is available. Data is a reflection of a very complex decision process of what are we going to record or not, and it's different from the knowledge that we do have.
I think that we could have been going on. We could continue this Q&A up until and including lunch, but we have breakout sessions and other things to do as well. So I'm very sorry, but we have to thank you for now. But
Thank
you
you
will
very
have
much.
breakout sessions.
Yes.
Thank you
Thank
so
you very
much.
Are you ready?
I am ready. Well, when I started writing on political economy issues, the world was not a widespread democratic environment. There were many democracies, many non-democracies, but there was a general optimism that democracy was on the rise. The political scientist Samuel Huntington had written a book called The Third Wave, talking about how a wave was sweeping the world, pushing countries more towards democracy. Today, it looks very different. The last 20 years or so have seen more and more threats against democracies, and democracies themselves have not performed that well. If you look at the industrialized world, support for democracy, especially among young people, is at a modern low. So it is time to ask, first, whether democracy is really important for us. And second, what kind of democracy? How can we do better as democratic nations? My answer to the first one is yes, democracy is important, desirable, and more essential than ever. My research shows, and of course it uses historical data, or data at least, not the last 10 years, but if you look at data from the 19th century to around 2010 or so, you will see that democratic countries do better. When a country democratizes, it grows more, it delivers better public services, it delivers better education, health services to its citizens. And democracy is essential for people to have voice, for people to have security often. But democracy is not popular right now, or relative to what it was 20 years ago. Why not? Because I think democracy has created aspirations and it hasn't risen up to them. Democratic countries have seen huge increase in inequality. They were expecting higher quality public services, education, healthcare. They haven't delivered those. So in some sense, democracy hasn't risen up to the challenge that it sets to itself, giving people voice, giving people shared prosperity, giving people good, reliable services. So I think we need to renew the democratic compact so that democracy becomes more popular both within democratic countries and around the world.
That was, of course, Daron Acemoglu, who received the Prize in Economic Sciences together with James Robinson and Simon Johnson last year for their work on how institutions determine if nations succeed or fail. This prize was very, well, some might say expected. He's a very famous economist, but it was also sometimes criticized. Some commentators said that they got the prize for saying that democracy is good. Should the Nobel people really be giving the prize for someone saying something that simple? Which may be a fair question. Can you get the Nobel Prize just for saying that democracy is good? So let's ask one of the people who actually decided on the prize to Acemoglu and Johnson and Robinson. John Hassler, who is a member of the Committee for Economic Sciences. Welcome.
Thank you.
Is it as simple that they said that democracy was good and got the prize, or is it more complicated?
It's a little bit more complicated than that, of course. So I would say that they got the prize for two things. And the first one was to establish a causal relation and a long-run relation between good institutions and later economic development. And of course, people for a long time have thought that and noticed that good institution, rule of law, that people are not exploited and so on, that seems to go together with economic development. But it's always difficult to know in which direction causality goes. Is it that good economic development leads to good institutions, or is it the opposite? And that's been a discussion for a very long time. And then the laureates came up with the idea that, well, wait a minute, there is a natural experiment that was taking place a couple of hundred years ago, several hundred years ago, namely that when the Western world colonized large parts of the rest of the world, which was of course a very bad thing, but they did it in different ways, depending on whether the idea was to just extract revenue from some then rich countries, or was it to provide a new home for settlers? And then the idea was that here the institutions that were instituted, whether they were extracted, just collecting rent, or put in place for the purpose of the settlers, that was a very big difference. And then they could see whether, so that became like a natural experiment. There, in some places, bad institutions were put in place, and in some places, good. And then they followed what happened afterwards. And that established, I would say, for the first time, kind of a credible causal, what we call identification of the long-run effects of good institutions. So I note that you want me to stop, because that was just the first thing. But maybe we come back to the other thing that they got the prize for, too.
Well, yeah, just want to clarify one thing, but maybe that's what you were getting at. So, but when you say that So the extractive institution, that could have been that they sort of used slaves or something like that. And the other part, when they wanted to live, they had other institutions. But this is in the 17th century, so it's not that they instituted democracy in Northern America and slavery in the South. So the kind of institutions that are sort of good, it goes beyond the democratic institutions.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a what we think of good institutions, or what they think about good institutions, I think a better word is kind of whether they are extractive or not. Is the purpose of the institutions just to extract people? In their work, they talk about the elite and the masses. And is the institutions, do they serve only the purpose of exploiting the masses for the gains of the elite? Then it's a bad institution. That's an extractive institutions. And such institutions were introduced in many of the colonies, but not everywhere.
Just also, before we get to the second point, but when we say institutions, what do we actually mean by that?
It's a broad concept. It's kind of generally, you could think of it as the rules that govern society in a broad content. So is it rule of law? Democracy is one part. Do we have the freedom of speech? But it's also kind of wider things like equality of opportunity and things like that.
I guess property rights might
property right is kind of the a way of making sure that the elite cannot just exploit the benefits of people's hard work.
Okay, so those were the institutions, and that's the first part. What's the second part of their prize?
The second part is more theoretic. So a question. So what they showed is that bad institutions tend to kind of survive for a long time, and they constructed ideas and theories of trying to explain why there is this tendency of bad institutions to prevail, but also why sometimes democratization happens. So that's and at the center of their thinking is what we economists call a commitment problem, to be able to promise something about the future. And their ideas start with a question. So if you have some bad ruling elites and that always kind of exploits the masses, and they see that then the masses are not making any investments. They don't think that there's any point in kind of going to school, and so the economy doesn't work. But why doesn't the elite then promise, so say that we will not exploit you in the future, so do the investments? Well, this promise is not credible. So if you can, and that makes that under often the bad institutions, even if the rulers say that we're going to behave better in the future, no one believes it, and you get stuck. But sometimes democratization happens, and democratization is a way kind of providing credible promises for the future that the elite is not going to exploit the masses. And sometimes that's actually the only thing that the elite can do, and then democratization happens. Then it's kind of also a commitment problem in the other direction. The masses might have difficulties in promising not to, to perhaps even kill the old ruling elite. And there is also a problem like that.
But it seems a bit complex when you think about. I mean, and I guess that's why they do get an economic science prize, because it is a bit complex. But how do you explain change in this model? Because it seems like if you have an elite and they extract, and so sometimes you have a revolution, and sometimes revolutions succeed and sometimes they fail. Why don't they always succeed, or why do they fail?
Well, in their models, they have kind of a possibility of clashes, fights, and then in their model, they say that what's important is whether there is a tendency that sometimes the masses have a particularly good opportunity of winning against the elite. And then they say that if such an opportunity happens, which is kind of then a rare opportunity, that now is the time, then maybe it is in the best interest actually of the elite to say, okay, we give up, we democratize. And it seems like they document that often democratization has happened in such situations. There is kind of a sudden opportunity that arises. Now is the time for a revolution. Well, that often leads to democratization.
Is it then important then when you try to topple an elite that it's in order to get some sort of success? Does it have to be sort of large groups of society who replaces them, or do they otherwise become a new elite?
Yes, and that's, of course, we have seen that many times, that a small group claiming to represent the masses take over, and then, not much has happened.
And if I remember correctly, reading those, it seems like the reason why sometimes you said that these institutions, they don't really change. It's hard to make them change. That sort of the long historical tradition that sometimes go back. You mentioned the colonial times. Sometimes nations have structures that goes back several hundred years.
Yes. So in one of their works, they talk about the reversal of fortune, and where they show that those countries that were relatively rich, say 300 years ago, often they have kind of reversed and become poor. And their explanation is that in these rich countries, rich colonies, colonizer came and either took over bad institutions or introduced bad extractive institutions. And that led to a very long period of bad economic development, which didn't happen in the poorer, like in Northern America, for example, where there wasn't much to exploit. So there, the idea was to build institutions that were good for the settlers, and they were also good for long-run growth. So you get the reversal of fortune, and then that's one of the things that they document.
I think it's quite easy to understand. Well, why excluding or extracting institutions might be bad. You mentioned people won't invest if they don't feel secure and things like that. But so how do these? I think they call it inclusive institutions. What is it about them that makes, I guess, democracies in the final, but even before democracies were around, some nations were more inclusive than others. So what is it that makes them rich?
Well, I think equality of opportunity is one thing that's very important. So making it possible for people to develop, and there, of course, education is of central importance. And it relates also to my own research, which is about equal opportunity, social mobility, and the importance of that for society to work well in the long run. So I think that's a very important thing, and we see certainly problems there in many parts of the Western world.
These institutions are both political and economic, of course, that they talk about. What is the connection? I mean, can you have sort of inclusive economic institutions and extractive political institutions, or do they have to go hand in hand?
Yes, I mean, it's not obviously, if we look around in the world, there is it's not a one-to-one mapping between the two, but they tend to go together. And we, at least we in the past, and we hope also in the future, democracy leads to more inclusive institutions also from an economic point of view. That democracy leads to broader access to education and to health, and perhaps a more equal development of income and so on. But there we see that it doesn't necessarily work. And Daron pointed to the US, where we have seen that equality of opportunities is disappearing. The American dream is failing. It becomes more difficult to get education and so on. Ray Chetty has shown that now kids born in the 40s, almost all of them became richer than their parents. But kids born in the 80s, it's a 50-50 coin, 50-50 chance. And that is basically because of less equality of opportunity. And so democracy doesn't necessarily lead to good outcomes, but we need to step up there, clearly.
Yeah, because that seems a bit like a paradox almost, that if democracy is good, once it's in place, shouldn't it be, just like the excluding institutions are sort of self-perpetuating, shouldn't democracy be also? And as Acemoglu, as we heard, he talks that democracy sometimes fails in providing what it should provide, and that's why there's a disillusionment. How can that be?
Well, it's not a foolproof institution, of course, and in my view, when money becomes too influential in the political process, then we have problems, and that's clearly what has happened in the US.
Let's see if we have any questions. Sara, do you have any questions? Oh, there you are.
Okay, yes, we do have questions. Does the country become rich by being a democracy, or does it become a democracy because it is rich?
So, according to the research by the laureates, they argued that there is a clear causal link from good institutions, including democracy, to good economic developments. So the causality is in that direction. It's not 100% sure, of course. I mean, but there is, they document a clear historical relation that it tends to be the case that democracy produces, or at least has produced, good economic outcomes, including higher growth.
Can you just, because do they then argue against the idea that, for example, if you trade with autocracies or countries with an extractive institutions, then that will open up. If you make them rich, they will become democracies. That's sort of the modernization theory.
Yeah.
Do they disagree with that?
Yeah, they would challenge that view. At least the idea that richness automatically leads to democracy. They would challenge that, and that, I think, that was kind of more the conventional view among economic historians before this last year's laureates.
Yeah.
So I don't think that they would be against trade, though. But clearly they challenged the traditional view that income growth leads to democracy, and said that it's vice versa.
Sorry, I
thank
kidnapped some time there, but please.
Yeah. If a leader in a democracy starts undermining important institutions, what can the public do to stop this in a peaceful way?
Yeah, that's a
hypothetical question.
That's a very good question, of course, and that doesn't have an easy answer, obviously, and I suppose that at least I'm not the only one thinking about what's happening in the US now, and I don't think there is any, easy answer. But of course, trying to raise your voice and to do it collectively, that's what we can do. And I don't think there is any other solution than speaking up.
Can colonization have a good side if the effects in the colonized countries are still felt today, including in liberal institutions?
Well, colonization was an obviously very, very bad and very immoral thing everywhere. But still, you can use this as a natural experiment. I'm thinking about my father, who was an investigator of plane crashes. And the plane crash is a bad thing, of course, but you can still, by examining what happened, learn something that's important. And I think we would see it in the same way here. So I took as example Northern America, where good institutions were developed, which had led to good economic development. It was obviously bad for the native population that they were colonized also.
What is the correlation between a country's level of poverty and democratization?
As I said, kind of the key message of their work is that you would expect that democratization leads to higher growth, and they show that that has happened in the past. So that would imply a positive correlation. But it's important to note that correlation is not, that correlation has been seen in the past, before the laureates' work too. So the discussion was not really about whether the correlation existed, it was about in which way does causality run? Is it from a good economic growth to democracy, or vice versa? And here they argued that you can claim that an important causality runs from democracy to good economic outcomes.
When we talk about poverty, is equality? I mean, is that also? I mean, you can have growth that is unequal. Is that a problem for these, or do you have to have an equality in the growth in order to be inclusive?
No, so there, I'm thinking again here on my own research. So what we looked at the relation between equality or equal opportunity and economic outcomes and so on, and then we showed in our work at least. I feel a little bit embarrassed to take it up when we talk about Nobel laureates, but nevertheless, there we showed that it really depends if you increase equality of opportunity by, for example, making access to education easier, that tends to have a good effect on growth, but it also tends to have a good effect on social mobility, equality of opportunity, of course, and on equality too. So you can get both equality and high growth, but then you should focus on the things that gives equality of opportunity. So,
yeah. That's actually, we don't have time for any more questions, but I'm sorry I took the last one. But the thing is, I've been reading about these laureates, and it's so interesting. So I really recommend, whether or not if you're interested in history and economics, you really made a good choice in the Nobel laureates, because their work is really tremendously interesting.
Thank you.
And very, I mean, you hear about inequality and elites, and it's also very political, but not in the sort of party politics way. You can draw conclusions, deep conclusions.
And you told me that you had that you guessed that they should get it eventually.
Yeah, they're quite famous. It was an easy choice for you, I guess. So thank you so much, John, and thank you for being. And let's move on.
And now it's time for our next speaker. She is a professor in social science and has, among many things, been involved in the European Council's work on competences for a democratic culture. Please welcome Claudia Lenz.
Hello, everybody. It's really great to be here. I already have learned lots of interesting things, and I'm really impressed. I'm really impressed about all of you, and I think you are one of the group being most important to defend and make the democracies we are talking about resilient. And I'm using my 15 minutes now to tell you why I think that and how I think that. This is the picture we have been presented and meeting today. We experience that democracy is under pressure, and it is under pressure by interrelated contexts, and we could say interrelated, interconnected global crisis. What we have been talking little about today is, for example, climate crisis and the pressure, the fear, the conflict level, which is related to that. We have been talking to the rise of anti-democratic ideologies, which are gaining ground, also in countries which so far were assumed stable democratic countries. Authoritarian rule is being established in more and more countries. And we see that these developments press on democracies also by targeted attempts to undermine them, to, as Asa said, to use the weaknesses of democracy, the weak points, which are exactly the need to be felt and accepted as legitimate, as something worth to engage for. So the anti-democratic disinformation, propaganda campaigns, and so on target exactly these points. So the question is, what can make the liberal and pluralist democracies more resilient? What helps us to respond to these threats and development without giving up on the democratic way of doing it? Because what we know is that when responding to external threats, there's always a risk that we lose out of sight what we were defending. And this is always when it comes to security issues, to conflict, also to terrorism. We have quite a lot of insight that this also can lead to weaken democracy from inside, because logics of friend and enemy, black and white polarization gain ground. So, one way of defending democracy from within is to regard and to look what is to strengthen in terms of a democratic culture. We have been talking about democratic institutions quite a lot, parliamentary elections, rule of law, independent judiciary, and of course authoritarian forces try to break down these institutions and structures. But however, as we see in countries, for example, also in, it was mentioned before, what the peace government in Poland tried, what the Orban government in Hungary is doing, is to keeping, in a way, the shallow structures, but to empty them also for real content and value. So if institutions are not upheld and regarded to be as legitimate by the population, by those who are meant to participate in them, they can very, very quickly lose their strength and then also more easily be abolished. So what a resilient democracy needs is resilient citizens, and citizens who are both capable to commit and to defend democratic processes, but not only capable, but also willing to do so. So we need not only to be able to take part in democratic processes, we need not only, it has been mentioned, knowledge, critical understanding. It's not only that we need to acquire knowledge and critical understanding, we need to be willing to engage ourselves in democratic exchanges, in also exchanges, respectful exchanges with people we don't agree to. So capacity, willingness, and commitment, and also conviction are some of the key words here. So where is school in this? The Council of Europe developed between 2013 and 2018 a competence framework, which was meant, and it in fact also responded to the wish from its, by then, still 47, now left 46 member states after that Russia was excluded. The 46 member states, they said we need help and tools in order to foster democracy through education. So what we're talking about is strengthening democracy through education, but also in education. And this framework describes a set of competences which can and need to be developed in order to acquire each citizen with these capacities, but also with the experiences of how to use it and the motivation to do so. The competence here is an idea, or the concept of competence here is composed by several elements. So competence is not the same as knowledge or as skills. It's always regarded as an interplay. Competence is shown when we respond to challenges, to situations. And here we actively apply values, attitudes, skills, knowledge, and understanding. And this, I think, in a very interesting way, points back to the discussion we had on artificial intelligence today. Because here it was made the point, it's not enough to only know or to have information. It's also the question how we process this, how we are able to process, but also what kind of judgments we can make. And here values are also in the play. So for example, relating to artificial intelligence in constructive and I would say democratic ways is a good cause to show what competence as this kind of interplay of capacities means. Very importantly, also, the Council of Europe underlines that competences for democratic culture, they also include the element of interculturality. Plural democracies need to allow not only for different opinions, but also for diversity. And we can also see the reverse. These authoritarian crackdowns on democracy, they always start with minorities. They always start with taking the rights from minorities and playing on that minority or all the others will accept it. So intercultural competence and the capacity to live equally and as equals in diverse society is part and parcel of democracy and needs to be part and parcel of what will be defended in democracies. These are the three elements of the framework, which one is a conceptual model. I will come in a minute and explain it, with 20 competences. Then there are descriptors, like how do we describe, how can we as educators see or describe and also give feedback on the way or the degree to which competences are developed. And then there are guiding documents which are about pedagogies and pedagogical principles and also curriculum and so on. I will now take you through all these elements. This is the first, the competence model. As I said, it's the interplay of these four elements: values, attitudes, skills, knowledge, and understanding. And as I also said, it's always assumed to occur and be activated in competence clusters. This is how it looks like. We have values which are related to the basic values of democratic and diverse societies, related to human dignity, human rights, cultural diversity, and the entire realm of democracy, justice, fairness, and so on. The attitudes, we have, again, something which is linked to also diversity, openness, also to cultural otherness, beliefs, worldviews. And then we have a cluster of respect, civil-mindedness, responsibility, self-efficacy, and tolerance of ambiguity. How do we approach reality in order to respond to situations and challenges in democratic ways? And then, of course, we have skills. What do we need to be able to do? How are we able to solve situations, challenges? And here, things which we have heard about today, autonomous learning skills, critical thinking skills, but also these relational, interactive things, skills of listening and observing, empathy, flexibility, but also cooperation and conflict resolution skills. So being able to act in democratic ways is not only that I personally are able to think smartly and critically, it's the way how I behave and how I'm able to behave. And then, of course, there's a whole set of knowledge, and I won't take you through all this, but maybe only two comments. We call it knowledge and critical understanding. And this is to make the point, again, which was made earlier today. It's not only about knowing by heart lots of facts or being able to store in our heads and activate lots of information. It's also about this metacognition, that we are able to reflect on where does this knowledge come from, how was it produced, epistemological questions maybe of epistemological injustice and so on. So here we already see that these wings of the butterfly, they point towards each other. And then the question, of course, is how do we work with this? In education, it's in order to develop something, it's very important to see what do we want to develop and how can we observe that what we want to see is developed. And for each of the competences, a set of descriptors follows. And just a very short comment on the way this was developed. The competence model was, in a way, a distillation of over 100 existing competence models, and this, again, was a quantitatively validated set of descriptors, which was tested by over 3,000 educators around Europe. And here you see that it's in a way, always a statement about an observable behavior, which determines, can I see this? Can I see? And in the same time, you see it's basic, intermediate, advanced. There is a kind of progression idea, but it's also formative, because these descriptors, they give us, as educators, a language. I can give a feedback. I see this in you. I saw this yesterday. You can be better. You can also develop this in another context. So the entire educational ethos of this competence framework is very much informed about these ideas that also education should always model and show democratic culture and not only rigid, top-down, authoritarian ways of teaching, assessing, and maybe high-stake assessments. And this brings us to the third part, which is the pedagogies. So we have a model, we have descriptors, and then we have a set of documents that tells us how should we work with this. And here, this ethos, the educational ethos, is very important, because also this model here could be used in quite rigid ways. You could, and this was when we developed this a harsh criticism. Oh, if you have values or attitudes, you can do high-stake assessment, and that can be harming. That really, this can be harming students. If you say, oh, but you have not shown any respect or any empathy that will block you from further progress in your learning itinerary. It shouldn't be like that. It is very important. Now I went the wrong way. Here. It is very important that this idea of democratic culture is always underlying. That working with the competence model addresses the learner as the whole person, the resources which can be mobilized and which can be seen and which can be fostered in each learner and which can engage them. And here we are again, what makes democracy and democratic cultural resilience? Yes, that we want to connect, that we want to engage with this. So using and working with this competence framework means it should be done in a way that are engaging and not disengaging, not harming, but fostering the good in us and the good in each other and our reciprocity. And that means also we need to do this within processes which in themselves are democratic. So we have a lot of approaches here which are student-centered, which are interactive, and which are about learning not only about democracy, but also through democracy, through democratic processes. And I will use my last 2 minutes here in order to address you. Because when we worked with this competence framework, it became more and more clear for us that if we want learners, if we want students to develop these kind of competences, this kind of democratic engagement, this way of being able to both take part and defend democracy, we need teachers which are able to do so. We need teachers who are able to model all this. We need teachers who are, of course, competent about all the methods and methodologies, who know that subject and so on, but we need also teachers which show and model empathy, which show and model respect, and which show and model conflict resolution skills. So as one of the additional resources in the material which follows the competence framework, we developed also a teacher self-reflection tool. How we as educators can systematically and also in communities of practice take a starting point in these 20 competences and the butterfly and make ourselves as educators fly in democratic ways. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and a big hand to Claudia. If I were a world leader, I am not sure how to finish that sentence. Do you? We went to the world leader of tomorrow and asked them. Let's see what they have to say.
Hi everyone, my name is Hassan Ihawi from Morocco.
My name is David from Ukraine.
My name is Ojasvi Gomre from India.
If I were a world leader,
if I were a world leader,
if I were a world leader,
if I were a world leader, I would fix the lack of unity in solving global problems. Imagine if countries collaborated like a well-coordinated sports team, fighting climate change, poverty, and injustice together instead of competing.
I would do everything possible to bring peace and stop war.
I would fix climate change by investing time and funds into clean energy, and I would fix the economy because fair wages should be something for everyone.
I would address the issue of climate change and unsustainable development.
If I were a world leader, I would lead an international campaign to save Earth from the negative effects of global warming.
I would prioritize education for all, ensuring that every child has access to quality learning.
I would end the militarization of ocean waters and its resources. Nations are turning waters into battlegrounds for the dominance of resources. I propose an ocean peace treaty.
I would make healthcare free and easy for everyone.
I would call on people to stop all wars and military conflicts and forget forever about murder and violence.
If I were a world leader, I would aim to solve the issue of corporate consumerism. This issue makes big corporations the focal points of our economy, where a lot of cash flows in but doesn't flow out back to the locals.
I would stop the killing of children in war and armed conflicts between individuals and countries.
I would fix the education system first by increasing funding for schools and make quality education available to all children.
I would resolve global territorial disputes by strengthening the UN and downsizing the hegemony of certain developed nations.
And if I were a world leader, I would focus on achieving all of the global sustainable goals, more specifically no poverty, before 2030.
I would build up a new world system which is based on inspiring children with knowledge, ethics, and sustainable development goals. I expect to establish public institutions that promote free education, innovation, and moral values, because true development is not just in providing infrastructure or technological devices or robots, but in fact it is in the minds and hearts of people.
If I were a world leader, I would focus on ensuring equal education for everyone, regardless of their backgrounds or financial situation.
If I were a world leader,
yeah, it seems like the older generations have always been concerned about the youth of today, that they are less ambitious or disciplined or generally worse off than we were when we were young. But looking at this, it's quite clear that, well, that's not right. It seems a reason to be hopeful. Well, of course, there's one thing that when I look at these young and very hopeful people, they have lots of dreams, but maybe the older generation have something to teach them at least about how to achieve those dreams. And our next guest is Maria Wetterstrand, who's a former leader of the Swedish Green Party and now a consultant in sustainable development, among other things. Welcome, Maria.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here.
Do you also feel hopeful when you hear these young visionaries?
I do feel hopeful, but I'm also happy to see that they actually seem to believe that if you were a world leader, you could actually achieve something. That's nice, sort of.
You don't mean you mean that world leaders aren't always as capable as you
one
think.
of the frustrating things about being a politician, which I'm not anymore, is that you want to do a lot of things, but it's actually always so much more complicated than what you think. When I was young, I had this idea that if I could only explain to the older generation about the state of the world and how unequal it is and how we are destroying the environment, then they would change automatically somehow. But then I grew up and I realized that I still do believe that information and knowledge is still important, but I also realized that there are a lot of people who do understand, but they still don't want to change. And that's very, very frustrating.
So, but what is it that, well, one thing that our future world leaders didn't have to answer is how would they become world leaders? I guess having to be elected also stands in the way of some dreams.
Well, having to be elected, of course, is part of being a politician, and you need to sort of have a message that people will respond to in some way. But I do believe that politicians often underestimate the electorate. They believe that if you just come with some populist ideas that would sort of make people feel that there's something in it for me personally, like the egoistic kind of messaging, I think they underestimate people often, because I do believe that many people would prefer to vote for someone actually who had a vision or an idea and were thinking more long-term also about their children and grandchildren and so on. So it's a pity that we don't get that kind of political discussions actually.
And you also mentioned, well, even if you do get elected and you become a leader, it's hard to get things done. But is it also hard to know what to do?
It might be. It might be difficult. I mean, you know that you want to stop climate change, right? And to do that, you don't want to tear down like the whole society. You don't want to sort of crash the economy and force people to live in poverty or in caves. Sometimes from the Green Party we get that people think that we want them to live in caves and, you know, like on the Stone Age and so on. It's not like that, but so you would like to stop climate change, but you still want some kind of modern society and welfare system and stuff. And that's sort of when it becomes a bit tricky. Let's say you want to promote clean energy, for example. You want to build wind power and you want to close down coal power. We've done that quite a lot in Europe, actually. But that requires also a lot of resources. Because you need to build this wind power plant, you need to put up the solar panels and so on, and you might need to do some energy efficiency measures and blah, blah, blah. So you would need a lot of resources. Those resources need to come from somewhere. So you might need to open a mine somewhere because you need those resources. And that mine will destroy the local environment, and people will protest against it and prefer that it's somewhere on the other side of the planet rather than here in Europe. So you would get this kind of conflict sometimes, which makes it difficult. And then sometimes it's actually a lack of knowledge because we haven't tried to save the world before, really. So we might not even know what works and what doesn't work. So we need the expertise of science, but we also need to try things out sometimes to see if it works.
Yeah, well, we often talk about that, and which is of course true that we need the expertise of science because, well, we talk about climate change, it's a scientific question, and so on. But I guess, I mean, we say the politicians should listen to experts, but aren't politicians expert in something as well? What are politicians good at in that equation?
I think that it's like this. You have a lot of knowledge out there. A politician doesn't know everything, of course, but they have a lot of experts around, and they listen to those experts, and they get input also from the civil society organizations and from the public discussion and so on. Depending on their ideology, they would listen more to some and less to others. So that's what politicians are good at. They are good at, you know, taking in all this knowledge, filtering it through their ideology, and then decide where to put their priorities. Because as a politician, you will get natural scientists who will tell you one thing. You will get economists sometimes telling you something else. You will get a sociologist saying something else. And you need to somehow navigate in that and find out, like, where do you want to be depending on your ideological base. And that's what the voters voted for you to do, I would say.
So, and I guess you can't lose that. I mean, how pragmatic can you get without losing your ideological compass or direction?
I think you can get very pragmatic because you always need to find the majority, otherwise you can't do anything. But you can be pragmatic on some things and maybe not in others. So I'll give you examples. Like when I was in the Swedish Parliament, we were quite a small party. During my first 4 years, we had 4.5%, but we were needed to get the majority for the government of the Social Democrats. So they needed to give us some things because otherwise we wouldn't vote for their government. And then we got the congestion charges here in Stockholm, was one of those things that we wanted to do. We got higher taxation on oil for heating houses. Those are not very popular things, but we got them through because they needed us to form the majority. So even if we had didn't have a very strong position when it came to our mandate, but they gave us the power because the other parties didn't want to cooperate with each other. So that's what you can do. You can then push for a few things, but then we had to accept everything else that Social Democrats wanted to do. That's pragmatic in a way.
Yeah. Yeah, well, definitely. So the scientists, they understand how sort of nature works or economy works, and the politicians seem to be good at navigating the ideological landscape. But who actually gets things done? Is it also the politicians who are good at decision making, or do you need other experts for that?
Hopefully they are good at decision making, and hopefully they are also good at understanding society. Like how the society works and what levers to pull or push to get things happening. Like taxation, for example. You have a lot of economical financial experts in the government and in the parliament, of course, but the politicians, they need to tell them what they want the taxation to achieve. And then you can get the help of the experts to find out exactly how you would do that. And also you would have a lot of people who know the law, like how to write new law, and you might tell them that you want to you want to promote like equal marriage for couples of the same sex, for example, and then they will help you write the actual legislation. They might not even want that, or they might want it, but they are just the experts. So you will tell them what you want to get done, and they will help you.
Yeah, I'm also thinking, I mean, you work now, not as a politician, but you work as a consultant. That seems like another group in this landscape of decision-making. People who are not the scientists, or not the politicians. What is does that ecosystem? What do you do all day?
What do I do? I actually spend a lot of time helping business people, companies understand politics.
And why do they need to understand that?
And why do they need to understand that?
Or what don't they understand?
They are quite often quite prejudiced, actually. They think that politicians sometimes make the wrong decisions because they don't understand, because they are stupid. That might, of course, be the case at times, but I would say that the normal circumstance is that the politician do know that some people won't like what they do, but they will do it anyway because they are listening to someone else who has another kind of priority. So I try to help them understand why are the politicians doing what they do, what might it mean for this company, and if they want to express an opinion to someone in the decision-making community, how would they do that? Not only going there thinking that they are stupid. So trying to improve the dialogue somehow.
And then I think that's really interesting that to have the dialogue, because it points to the fact that then the democracies are complex. It's not a simple way of running a country, that you have many moving parts.
It is, and I think the difficult thing of being a politician is to not only listen to those who scream the loudest, because that's something that's I mean, of course, someone has economical interest in some of the things that we decide, and they will be able to put a lot of money into lobbying or campaigns to stop that decision or promote that decision. And as a politician, you need to also find other people who are not the ones with economic interest but might have other interests. It can be like civil society organizations, environmental NGOs, for example, or scientists, or those representing the children, or the own people, the people on the street in your own municipality, or such things. So you don't only listen to those who have the funds to make the campaigns and who are sort of those who scream the loudest.
Yeah, so that, because I think about that a lot especially when you talk about the Nobel Peace Prize, for example, and activists who are making a change. But activists can be a bit problematic also in a democratic sense, because where do they get the legitimacy? But I guess then it's up to the politicians to give them the right amount of influence.
Yeah, I worked in Brussels for a couple of years recently, and in Brussels it's not very uncommon that there will be like the farmers coming to outside the European Parliament and burn like car tires or such things, and it seems to work because they often get what they want, and I don't understand that. As a politician, I wouldn't want to listen to someone who's doing that kind of actions. I mean, civil disobedience has a role to play in a democracy. It does, because as long as it's non-violence, as long as it's like symbolic things that you do to sort of highlight some problems, challenges that you see, and you are prepared to take the punishment that you might get by the law. I think that has a role to play, definitely. And if you look at environmental topics, for example, there has been a lot of things done with civil disobedience that have promoted stronger environmental policy and human rights and equality for women, for example. So I think that has a role to play, but it needs to be like non-violence based, and that's very important.
When we hear about this sort of, again, the complex ecosystem of different groups and different ways of making your voice heard. It sometimes seems like it would be easier if you just give one of these young people the job as world leader and they would decide. But I guess.
And how would you do that exactly?
Well, take any of them. They seem no, but you're absolutely right. So, but that's I guess that's not. Do you still? I mean, I guess it's easy to become cynical when or about politicians. Like if you try to explain politicians to business, it seems like. So, but I guess you like the system anyway.
I do believe in politics because I am very concerned about the state of the environment and the climate, and since those are the kind of issues that you can't leave to any one individual to solve by themselves. Because even if an individual would try to decrease their own emissions, you will still get climate change, probably. Because if everyone else is not doing the same thing, then the emissions would continue. So politicians really need to get together and find the solutions to that, both on the local and national level and the EU level and also globally in the UN, to try to set sort of the framework for how we can together try to save the environment and the climate, because otherwise we will get what you're calling the tragedy of the commons, that one person might gain a lot from continuing to pollute, but they won't gain a lot by stopping. So you will always sort of get a development where you use the resources, where you pollute the environment, if you don't get together and find the solutions for all. More or less, not at the same time maybe, but at least together somehow.
Yeah. So even though it's complicated, it's still the best way to do
It's definitely the best way.
Ah, good.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Maria. And if you're more interested in the tragedy of the commons, you can look up the economics laureate in 2009, Elinor Ostrom, who wrote a lot about this. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now we will continue, and I will have very soon present the next guest, but to give you a little bit of context first. In 2022, the Swedish government shelved the investigation about free leisure activity for all. And as I've been around some of you a couple of days now, the international teachers, and yesterday you were out in different schools in Sweden, in Stockholm area, and when you got back, you talked what you've been experiencing, and one thing that I recognize, and I've been seeing this myself as a teacher in Sweden, you mentioned that there wasn't much sports, it wasn't much music. Some of the schools that you did go to had a lot of music because it was a music school, but in general there seems to be a little lack of sports and music. So I would say that one would think that this should be interesting for the state or the municipalities to offer alternatives to have free leisure activities for all. And our next guest is one that has taken matters in his own hands, so to speak. And I will introduce you to a musician with a strong sense of social engagement, and he's also one of the best Swedish artists of the past 20 years. So let me welcome Adam Taal. So, Adam, while you find your way up here, can you tell me a little bit about Katarina Cup? What is that?
Yes, happy to meet you all. My name is Adam. I started Sweden's and I think the world's, possibly the world's first table tennis and music festival.
Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. Table tennis and music. For me, that sounds a bit strange. But yeah,
yes.
a little.
I agree, very strange.
Okay, well, how did you come up with that idea?
Well, I don't know how many of you guys have played table tennis before? Have you? Do we have anyone who hasn't played table tennis before? Okay, so kind of proves my point. Very popular thing.
Yeah.
And I think that at the same time it's strange because it's a very white sport in Sweden. And it shouldn't be that because it's supposed to be for everyone. So the initiative is all about engaging with youth in marginalized areas around Sweden, where music is big and table tennis is big. So, makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Perfect storm.
So what is this actually? Is it like you play and sing, or what do you do?
Not at the same time.
No?
But
that's good, or you could do. Maybe that's good.
I think it's a good idea to keep them somewhat separate, at least. But what we do is we go to, let's say, Vällingby. That's on the northwest side of Stockholm. And the kids always play on recess, and they play at fritids, but none of them play organized.
Why is that?
Because there's no possibility. Especially after Truls' summer Olympic victories, right?
Yeah. What happened?
So it's a lot of kids that want to play. So it's a cue to start playing. So what we do is we come out there and we let the kids play, and they play, and they play, and they play.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I know.
So it's kind
been
of
there.
yeah. So we have 12 dates this spring. We've had one date thus far, and that was over 250 kids who applied to play, but we could only play with 115, unfortunately.
That's still good, still good. But how does this work? Do you travel to different cities, or is it just here in Stockholm, or what else?
It's definitely as far north as Uppsala.
I'm from the north of Sweden. That's not north of Sweden, I tell you that. But anyhow.
Coming years at least. But yeah, definitely. We visit schools and we talk about the project, and we engage directly with the core audience. They're in 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. They also have interest, obviously, for music and music creation. So we actually go there and meet them, and have also the locations and activities dead center in their area.
So how does that work? Do you have the tournament first with the table tennis and then the music, and how does a day look for these kids on these occasions?
They wake up early.
Yeah.
If it's in collaboration with the schools, it's way easier to get them to wake up, obviously. But they wake up early and they start playing at 9, 10-ish, and then they play until the finalists have been, you know.
Yeah. And then where's the music?
In close proximity. Sometimes it's in the same building, but other times it's close by. Also in Kulturhus and different establishments in the same area.
Okay. So do you have to play the tennis and do the music?
No. It's generally to different audiences, I would say. But some of them want to do both, definitely.
Okay, cool. So do you think this is a democratic project in some way?
Yes.
How's that?
In every sense, I would say, because this enables kids to actually engage in activities they think is fun. And they, I mean, as recent as this summer, it's too many kids that don't have the opportunity to do it. So definitely, this is just one of the engagements that I think are needed. To activate everyone.
Yeah.
You know?
So what do you think the role of the municipality or the state or commune or whatever is in this kind of process?
Well, I'm not a politician, as you might know. But I'm thinking that's the whole thing. We need to engage every part of society, including the kids, no matter where they live, no matter what challenges they're faced with, as well as parents, because obviously that's equally as important, I think.
Do you do anything with the parents, or how do you get the kids?
Yes, of course. Parents are always welcome at the events. You know, also to be there and see the child compete.
Yeah.
And cheer on from the bleachers. So it's super important to engage the parents.
Cool. Okay, so we're among teachers from all around the world, as I said, and do you think that sports and music should play a bigger role in education? Now we're talking about after school, but in school. Do you have any thoughts about this?
Yes, I meet a lot of parents that specifically say that if the kids are active physically, they learn in a different way, in a better way, even. So I think maybe bad grades go hand in hand with less physical activity. I don't know.
Might do. So how was when you grew up and when you were in school, did you have like, I mean, you became a very talented musician, but did you engage in music in school, or did you think when you were in school that the music teaching that you got there were like boring, or was it good to you?
No, I loved school in general, maybe except for chemistry and physics.
Okay,
well,
I get it.
Yeah, I didn't love them, but yeah, still went to class. So I don't know if I'm the example to ask that question, because I loved school. You know?
That's good, of course.
Yeah.
Okay. As you mentioned, music is a big part of Katarina Cup. And what did music mean to you growing up?
Growing up, I didn't really care about music.
Okay.
So much until maybe late teen or mid-teen years, I think. But come to think about it, I began breakdancing when I was 6.
Okay,
but that was more of a physical activity rather than, you know, connected to the music in that sense. And then I kind of found my voice through music and my identity through music, as many kids do.
Yeah.
So it became, strangely enough, because it was super accessible for us to actually have a studio to go to, or it's a lot of years just spent in open air, just rapping, you know.
Yeah.
And not being able to record anything or have any studio to go to. So strangely enough, it was still the most accessible thing to have my voice heard.
Because you can do it everywhere.
Yeah, but at the same time, it wasn't accessible. So, I mean, we spent probably 8 or 9 years trying to get in, you know?
Yeah, and that's, I guess, why you do this, part of this, with the music.
Exactly.
Yeah. Do you have, like, studios... When you do the Katarina Cup and the music, do you have studios with you, or how do you, or you don't need studios anymore?
We try to place the activities at places that have studios, obviously, and people already working and engaging with the current population. So we're not trying to invent or reinvent the wheel. It's just the idea of Katarina Cup is very specific in that sense, because it mixes sports with culture and music.
Yeah.
In knowledge and engagement in general, you know.
Yeah.
So these are parts that are already deeply ingrained into Swedish society. So I'm not, you know, it's just a new name and maybe a new
face.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So now you're gonna play a song for us. What will you play?
First song is a song that I wrote probably 11 years ago, maybe.
Okay.
I've been around for a long time, man.
I know. Told you.
Too long.
No.
Too long.
No.
It's a song called "This Is War," and the album it comes from was my 3rd studio album, and it was an album about love, I think.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah. It sounds like this. Yeah.
I feel more
'cause I said yeah. All right. Yeah. One for the money, but two I did for you, babe. Took you across the world when I was living in my suitcase. And I admit that I was acting cold, but it was too late. Communication error, guess it didn't go two ways, huh? And she never knew what I was feeling. I should've written down, but I didn't. I put the foot just so I can say I missed it. And I still don't understand why I motherfucking did it. Yeah, I only know that I lost you because of that. Now you're sitting there with pistols in your lap. You're trying to shoot me down every time you get the chance. You're just trying to make it, you're just trying to get me back. I understand, but I can tell you this. Being without you is a war when I'm a pacifist. Shots ring all around, someone hit me, it's not what I wanted. It's a shame that this is all there is. But this is war, baby, yeah. Hey. Suddenly we down. You put one in my chest, yeah. I feel more, 'cause I said I die for love. Yeah. Don't push me, 'cause I'm too close to be a stranger. But even when we try, we don't say much. What am I even to do when you still harboring the same grudge, huh? Don't pull a pin on that grenade. I don't want you to keep hurting. Don't know what else I could say. Duck for cover, run for shelter, AK-47 sprays. Took so many bullets for you, made me weak like 53 to send a year in 7 days. I wrote too many songs, I did too many wrongs. The light behind these shades, I just couldn't take them off. It doesn't make it right that you even out the odds and you fuck somebody else. Speaking of a shell shock, don't understand, but I can tell you this. Being without you is a war when I'm a pacifist. Shots ring all around, someone hit me, it's not what I wanted. It's a shame that this is all there is. This is war, baby, yeah. Suddenly we down. You put one in my chest, hey. I feel, 'cause I said I die. Hey, shouldn't have, I guess. Wishes got you unloaded. Suddenly we down, my love. You put one in my chest now. I feel more, 'cause I said I die. Pulling. Tack så mycket.
So, thank you, Adam. Now, that definitely warmed up the room. Thank you, Adam. And this is also a great reminder of how arts can engage us, make us think, and spark new ideas. And I think we can all agree that subjects like art and humanities play a similar role in education. They encourage creativity and open up important discussions. And now, without any further ado, I give the mic to Karin and our next guest. Thank you.
Thank you. Such a joy having you here, Leymah, Gbowee. A warm hand. Welcome. So in 2011, you were awarded with the Nobel Peace Prize.
Sure.
And the prize motivation was for your non-violent struggle for the safety of women and for women's rights to full participation in peace-building work. And you had, by that time, great experiences of exactly that. You were a teenager when the civil war started in Liberia. Mm-hmm. For years to come, you survived in the chaos. And the civil war in Liberia, it contained all the components of brutality and violence, such as killing, torture, sexual violence, starvation, and the outspread use of child soldiers. Mm-hmm. And then you decide to do something. what was it you decided on? What was it that you wanted?
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. Thank you all so much. So this is the abridged version, and you went down the road. So midway into the crisis, maybe 12 years into the crisis, a group of us heard about women's involvement in peace building, and we started a little movement. But this was prompted by me going to a meeting. So we started a little group. We were going from place to place, training women. And then by the 14th year, I had this dream, and like literally I thought it was a drunken dream. But it was like a voice that I always hear in my dream that I've never seen the face of that person telling me, gather the women to pray for peace. And I went back to my boss, who was a pastor, and I said, I had this dream. So since you're a pastor, I think you should call the women of the churches together, because I do not have any kind of spiritual legitimacy to do this kind of thing. I drink, I'm not married, so I was ticking off all the boxes of things that made me unqualified to do that kind of work. And he said to me, Leymah, the dream bearer is always the dream carrier. If you give your dream to anyone else, the next time you see it, you won't recognize it. So it is on you to make this a reality. And the only thing I can do is to summon the women, and you can tell them. So we started something called the Christian Women Peace Initiative. Eventually, the Muslim women heard we're doing that, and they came to me and said, come and help us start something. So Fridays, we'll go to the mosques, and we'll mobilize the women. And then one day, we decided, let's do something for peace. But as the war was progressing, it was just 7 of us, one day sitting down having a conversation, and we decided, let's do a statement. At that time, Charles Taylor, who was the president of Liberia, had said he would not agree to any peace talks. There was no way that a foreign troop would come on the ground in Liberia, and he would not negotiate with the rebels because he was the legitimate president. So we wrote a statement countering all 3 of the things that he said. And then when it was time to sign, someone said, let's sign Women of Liberia. And my response was, this is disingenuous. How do 7 people sit here and claim to represent an entire nation of women? So if we really want to do this, let's sign our names. So we put our names, 7 of us, and sign. After we signed, then the question became, how are we going to put it in the media? Because we had no money. And someone said, I have an extra $10 in my bag. And then someone said, oh, but I know this. We have this friend, this female journalist. She has her own show. So we managed to call her. She came. We handed her the $10, handed her the statement, and it gained traction. And the reason it gained traction was because I think people wanted to see who these 7 fools were. You know, the ones who are about to be killed by a dictator. Because how do you name yourself in a time like this? So there were many people coming to do interviews, and then it emboldened other women. So the next meeting we had were about 65. The following meeting, 250. And the day we decided to step out to protest, we were about 2,500 women stepping out to protest. So then it just started a whole thing of us going from one activity to the other, wanting to meet with Taylor, wanting to present our statement to him. And one of the days, there was an international crisis group on Liberia. So this statement became like our sacred text. We carried it everywhere, but we didn't even have money to laminate. So it was in the middle of the rains. So we put it here. Or 1 or 2 people will carry different of the statement in their clothes. So we got to, someone called and said there was a meeting of the crisis group on Liberia at the UNDP building. We walked half the way because the money we had for transportation could only bring us halfway. So the rest of the way we walked on the rain. And then we get to this site, and here are men with guns guiding the place, because you have dignitaries from Sweden, from Liberia, from Norway. So the crisis group was comprised of people from the US, of people from the international world, trying to bring peace to Liberia. So we're standing across the street, and then we're saying to ourselves, how do we get our statement to those people? And there were two very young, audacious women with us. And they were like, we should go across the street. And I was like, no, you can't risk your life. But in that moment, I think the Swedes are known for being nosy. Because the ambassador from Sweden started coming out, and he was pointing at us. And so other ambassadors started coming to see this group of women. And these two young women, before I could blink, they like broke free from the group, ran across the street, and the soldiers were saying, back off, back off. And this guy then said, no, leave them, let them come. And they handed the statement to them and crossed the street. So then the crisis group had the statement, and we're taking this statement from one place to the other. But then we eventually got to meet Taylor. And the story with meeting him was that we had to write 7 letters of invitations. 7 letters asking to meet with him. One to him, one to his wife, one to his pastor, one to his brother, one to the member of parliament. So 7, when we eventually, everyone said they delivered to him. So this day we went to meet with him, because our goal at the time was that this government and all of the warring factions needed to make a final attempt, because everyone in the international community was saying, this is the last straw for Liberia. You've gone to 14 peace talks and it all broke down. This is your last chance. So we wanted them to really make that last chance a reality. So we got to see him, and his soldiers told us, if you're less than 10, the president will not see you. And my point was, so what if we're we're more than 10? And he smirked and said, because at that time, everyone was so afraid to come out, they didn't think that women would come out. More than 10, 2,500 of us showed up that day. When we got to his presidential palace, they said, no, we will only see 10 of you. And I was like, no, he must come down to see us. So there was this argument back and forth, I said, I'm going up there to tell. And this guy was like, why do you want to be killed? Why do you want to go to jail? Why can't you just accept? And I was like, no. So eventually they said, okay. He said he's coming downstairs. He came down. There were some women sitting. We were there. They offered us chairs. And as our act of disobedience and protest, we refused the chairs and we sat on the floor. And then it was time for me to present the statement. They had set the podium in a way that my back would be to him. I said, no, I can read a statement with my back to him. And he's sitting there with his dark glasses, and just like you don't know who he's looking at in that moment. But I don't even know where the confidence and the courage came from. But I think just looking down at those women who comprise of refugees, internally displaced women who had been raped, those who had lost their children. And in that moment, it was not about me. In that moment, it was about those women and the future of a nation that needed to be rescued. So I got up, turned the podium around to face him. And I read the statement. And after reading the statement, I said to him, Mr. President, we're sick and tired of running away. We're sick and tired of, so I just went on. And then afterwards, he promised that he was going to go to peace talks. But if our movement was a true movement, we'll find the rebels and give them the same statement. Next morning, we had a group of women, because we heard that the rebels had a base in Sierra Leone. So the next morning, we had a group of women on a flight to Sierra Leone to deliver a similar message. And then the rest is history.
Yeah, it's an amazing story, and I'm still where you meet Charles Taylor, who's a very dangerous man who later was convicted to 50 years in prison for war crimes. You have also said that you kind of took him off guard, because his world and his language was so brutalized and so filled with war and violence, and you came with the opposite message. what was his reaction?
I think he had no reaction. So the first day we came out to protest, everything about our group was ragtag. Like, we weren't sophisticated, we didn't have any money. We had this guy who had an old bus who would bus us around when we had money to pay him. We had a journalist who was also a visual artist who would print on any kind of sheet of paper for us. So like literally, so the first day we came out, 2,500 women, we had a banner that said, Liberian women want peace now. And we converged on the airfield where he would pass every morning, because he wasn't living far from that place, to go to work. And the first morning, his convoy slowed down. And everyone thought he was going to stop. He didn't stop, he drove past us. Next day, his convoy passed, and we're still there. He passed. He never passed again, because he did not go to work again. So I think in those moments, it was like, how do you confront a group of unarmed women? Because all he knows, like you rightly said, was to deal with people who had guns, so he didn't know what to do. But one of the essence of our sit-in was basically, if you go back to archival footages of the war in Liberia, everything you will see will be young boys with guns, but men with drugs and guns and everything. There was not the other narrative, the narrative of the rape and abuse. Allegedly, 65% of Liberian women were sexually abused and assaulted during the Civil War. So you do the math. So when we step out, it was first to say to the international world, look, we are also party to the conflict. We are also people that are being abused and misused on a daily basis. But the second thing was, the war started with 2 warring groups. By the time we stepped out, there were over 14 warring groups, and everyone had taken a piece of Liberia. So our protest was occupation. We wanted to occupy a space, but that space, contrary to all of the other spaces that had been occupied by warring groups, that space was the space for peace. And how do you counter that? That was his challenge, because he didn't understand the language of peace. And I believe firmly that men with guns are afraid of women who work for peace.
Yeah, obviously. In 2003, there is a peace treaty, thanks to your extreme persistence in this, where the different warlords met Charles Taylor and settled. So the end of the war, but we then find a country that is demolished. You write in your wonderful book, Mighty Be Our Powers, you say this: a whole generation of young men had no idea who they were without a gun in their hand. Several generations of women were widowed, had been raped, seen their daughters and mothers raped, and their children kill and be killed. Neighbors had turned against neighbors, young people had lost hope, and old people everything they painstakingly earned. To a person, we were traumatized. We had survived the war, but now we had to remember how to live. How do you do that?
You know, one of the things that I've come to recognize is, in order to live together, walk together, you must understand each other's history. And so, in as much as we had a brutal past, we all had a shared narrative that a war came, and that there is not a single household in this country that did not lose an individual. No family can tell you, I didn't lose a family member. That's the first narrative. So it didn't matter who killed who, but we all shared that, because we were a small country when the war started. 3 million people. We were able to kill 10% of our population as a result of the war. So we had that. But gradually, we also recognized that after 14 years, it wasn't going to do us any good if we're antagonistic towards one another. Let me give you an example. When we sat on the airfield to protest, there was this woman who was very upset with another woman who didn't understand the story. And so eventually we said, okay, we need to talk because we can't do peace in the midst of crisis. And she said to her, you know, you tell them, your nephew killed my son. And not only did they kill him, they chopped him up. And when it was time for us to bury him, he made us to buy his body back piece by piece. And I'm sitting here with you and building peace, and I'm angry. And then you have this old lady who tells me, when I ask her, you're old, you're cold, why do you always come? She said, do you have sons? And my response was, yes. She said, I had 2 sons. I said, I have 2 at that time. And she said, my first son died, my second son died. And when I heard that the women were gathering, I decided to come. I'm old, I'm uneducated. Technically, if there is peace, it's not going to benefit me. But I'm here to ensure that you don't lose your 2 sons. So all of those little stories of one group angry but still coming together to work for peace, one person saying, I have no, there is nothing that this peace is going to give me, but I must give it as my legacy to other people. So gradually we started finding means. And then because we're a very small country, everybody knew everyone. And so gradually we begin to learn to live. I'll tell you another heartbreaking story. So we go to a community after everything, we're going from one community to another, celebrating the peace. And this woman who was always very active, was very quiet. And I sat next to her, and they used to call me our ma, meaning the mother of all. So she said, our ma, what is peace? I said, we're trying to figure peace. And she said, but let me tell you a story, and you tell me if this is peace. My son was killed during the war, and my daughter left and said she couldn't stay, so she went as a refugee. I haven't heard from her for years. Eventually, I get a letter from her. She's married to a pastor, they have children, and she sent me pictures. The pastor is the killer of my son. My daughter is happily married. Obviously, her husband will never remember this incident because, of course, they were high. So what do I do? Do I keep silent because they're about to move back to Liberia? Do I keep it that my son-in-law, who shares beautiful grandchildren with my children, is the killer of my son? Or do I tell my daughter and break up their home? She said, I've made a choice to die with this because in my mind, this is what peace is. So we didn't have a framework. We didn't have a solution. We figured out how to live with one another. And every family had a story like that. Whether it was someone who treated you badly and refused to give you a place to stay in your darkest moment, every family, but gradually. And have we found reconciliation? I would say no. Not at least in the way that the world recognizes it. But collectively as a people, we're beginning to heal. We're asking ourselves, do we want to hold on to grudge and destroy the 22 years we've not reverted to conflict? 22 years we've made history on the continent of Africa. No one has gone to war. We've had the most contentious elections. We've had all kinds of problems. But it is that understanding that we must live together and we cannot afford to destroy what we all fought for. Yeah.
And in that, yes. And in that time of healing, I know that you have put a lot of effort into education. Would you like to say something about that in the picture of healing and rebuilding a society?
Yeah, so after winning a Nobel Peace Prize, we're in Oslo, in the hotel room. All of my family members are there, a few of my friends, and they were like, okay, you've won the prize, what's next? And my response was, duh, I can retire. And they said, no, you don't get a pass, you're 39. You win the prize at 39, you can't retire. So what is the next chapter? And I recognized that through all of the work that we had done, we didn't have young people. But then also as I went around the country, the need for education was key. So I decided, let's start something to send young people to school, focus on leadership and educational development. And we started, and I told myself my ambitious goal was that in 10 years, if I had sent 100 young people to school, I had done my job, I could retire. 13 years later, I'm sitting here and I'm having the best time of my life, meeting young people who came from nowhere, but who had dreams like my father, like myself. The only missing object was the resources they needed to go back to school. So when we started, we're reading all of the statistics that you all read. If you send a girl to school, you've educated a nation, da, 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 da. 3 years into the process, we recognized that was a black lie. Paying school fees doesn't mean you've educated a person, and you all know it better than I do. So we eventually had to sit down and do a re-strategizing that in order for us to invest in a girl, we had to take in the religious consideration, the social aspect, everything. And for those young, we did not even think about bodyguards even. But at the end of the day, 13 years later, when the need arises, we do whatever we need to do because we're working with the whole person. You can't work with the brain and not work with every other part. So we're working with the whole person, and that's what we do. So we call our scholarship 360 degrees, meaning we buy shoes, we buy books, we give food. Those in university that doesn't have a place to stay, we rent an apartment for them. Is it costly? Yes. But is it worth it? Yes. And then Ebola struck. First, we started our program with only girls, and then we started getting children-headed household. 4 sisters, 2 brothers, 5 brothers, 3 sisters. And then we had to sit back and say, do we educate only the girls and leave out the boys? The answer was a resounding no. So we've added boys into our program. I'll give quickly because I know we're running out of time. When I look back at the moments that I've done this work, we went to this community to start an after-school program. And we're looking for students who were extremely brilliant to run the after-school program, and they brought this girl. She's not your ideal tutor. Her uniform was raped. Everything was torn on her. She looked really ragged. Her parents had died. She was a child of the community. In that community, she would go and help fishermen to pull water to bring their net on shore. Long story short, we took her out of that community at 10th grade, brought her to a boarding school. She graduated. We sent her to university. She did her degree in engineering. Today, if anyone goes to Liberia, you will see there's a road construction from the airport to the city. She's one of the engineering supervisors on that road. That, for me, is the journey that I find myself. Amazing journey. I could never, but one thing we push, even though we push for academic excellence, but we push for character development, integrity, ethical and moral behavior, because we understand that the world as we know it, you can be as bright as anything and do some of the best invention, but if you don't have character, if you don't understand that you have responsibility to the other and to the environment, everything all of us are working for is useless. And that is the new journey that I'm on. And I'm enjoying it. It's keeping me young.
Well, I'll quote you again on that note. You said, peace building to me isn't ending a fight, by standing between two opposing forces. It's healing those victimized by war, making them strong again, and bringing them back to the people they once were. Thank you so much. Such a joy and privilege having you here, Leymah, Gbowee. A warm hand.
Thank you.
So we are coming to an end of this Nobel Prize Teacher Summit, and we are so happy that you have spent it here with us. Thank you for your warmth and for your engagement. It is very hard to say anything after this, and it's also very hard to conclude such a day because it contains both severe concerns as well as true hope. Leymah Gbowee says that we should turn our anger into good, and Maria Ressa, she says that in order to be the good, we need to believe that there is good in the world. So we have heard here today that the fundamental pillars of democracy, such as education, must be rooted into the very soil of our society, and when it is, we need to guard it inch by inch. So whenever you as a teacher go off to work, well, that is exactly what you do, and we salute you for that. So thank you, and a warm hand to you.